All right, well, let's get going. Good afternoon and welcome to USDA Spring Data Users Meeting. Although spring is a little bit in air quotes in Chicago today, but that's okay. My name is Joe Parsons. I serve as chair of the Agricultural Statistics Board here at NASS, and I'll be serving as your moderator for this event. We're very glad that we have the folks on the call and in the room, and look forward to sharing our programs with you today. So now I have to remember to do like 3 or 4 things at once. See if that works. Am I on the right slide? Not on the right slide. Let me click. Now my clicker's not working. There we go. I think that was my error. Anyway, we appreciate the opportunity to receive feedback on our products and services and to discuss recent and pending program changes. A few housekeeping notes. For our virtual attendees, we are offering closed captioning for those that find it difficult to hear the discussion. You'll find the closed captioning on the ribbon at the bottom of the screen, as shown on the slide. As we've done in the past, the recording, slides, and Q&A transcripts will be available on our website after the meeting, hopefully within a day or 2. If for some unforeseen event or technical problem occurs, we'll try to deal with it quickly. If we're unable to remedy the issue and need to end and restart, we'll communicate with each of you via your email from registration, likely with a new link to resume the meeting. Hopefully this won't be necessary. For the folks in the room, and I'm going to say this again later, we must use the microphone so the folks on the call can also hear you. Given the size of our group today, we'll dispense with audience introductions. There's a bunch of folks on the call out there, but we request that you share your name and organization as you offer questions in the breakout. I'm sorry, as you offer questions, and also if you're submitting a question in the Q&A, it'd be great if you'd put what organization you're with. So speaking of questions, you all are probably very familiar by now that's out on Zoom calls, but at the bottom of the screen on the ribbon, there is a Q&A button to post your questions. And of course, here in the room, we have a microphone, so just come on down. And we'll try to blend the questions between online and in the room. So, I want to try to have some balance here. And any questions we don't get to during the session, we'll pick those up and make sure they're included in the Q&A. There's also a chat window. We'll monitor that for technical issues and post any links to files and such as needed. There is also an option to raise your hand if you're having difficulty or you really want to, if you're online and you really want to try to ask a question verbally, we can try to work with that. You can also email Lakia at the email address below on the screen there. She'll be helping monitor all of these streams. And by the way, if you have a colleague that would like to join at the last minute, Lakia can help with that too. We have many attendees and distinguished guests from around the world, including folks from Statistics Canada and the Mexican Agricultural Statistics Organizations. We also have Darren Foltz from the Energy Information Administration joining us here in the room. At least I'm pretty sure he's here. There he is. Yes, sir. All right. So, for this spring meeting, we're trying out conducting the meeting in this hybrid format, and excited to be back at the Gleacher Center and able to coordinate with the Industry Outlook Conference, which is tomorrow morning, if you're not aware. We decided not to hold breakouts this spring, but we'll likely have them back in the fall when we get together. In just a minute or 2, we'll hear from the agency representatives to deliver some brief remarks, providing updates on their program of work. Those on the web are also welcome to begin posting questions in the Q&A at any time. And as a reminder for our panelists, please don't answer the questions in the Q&A because otherwise we won't be able to see them and the folks in the room will not get the benefit of that discussion. So that also applies to our panelists that are on the web that you don't see at the moment. So we have a number of folks supporting us here that are on the web as panelists too. All right. So you see the agenda there. We're going to do some welcome and overview, the agency updates. We'll have a little break. We'll come back, continue with questions, and then we'll finish up. And Caitlin, I think there's a reception tonight. Is that right? I'm trying to find Caitlin here. All right. Sounds great. 6 p.m. if you're here in the room. For those of you who are virtual, I guess at 6 p.m. Yeah, there you go. Pour your own. 6 p.m. somewhere. That's right. Okay. So I wanted to make sure and mention that in our reminder email from Marissa you received earlier this week, you should have received an attached file with highlights at each of the participating agencies here today. Thanks to Gene Porter for putting that together. It looks like this in your packet if you're here in the room. And I guess if you look at your PDF, it should look like that as well. You may want to take a look at that for additional discussion beyond our panelists' remarks. For each of the panelists, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and provide some brief remarks. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick Packnet at the Foreign Ag Service and to get us started. So I'm going to give you a monitor here you can look at.
Great. Thank you, Joe. And good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be back here in Chicago after our COVID hiatus. In FAS, we don't have many, any major data systems that we've rolled out in the last couple of years, and not many major changes to talk about. However, we continue to try to enhance and improve our data and analysis offerings in our data systems. So I'll just try to highlight a few of our recent activities. So first, I'd like to mention our agricultural export yearbook. Last Thursday, we published the 2021 Ag Export Yearbook on our webpage. And the yearbook provides a summary of the key U.S. agricultural commodity exports to the world, as well as to our primary trading partners, and includes analysis of the drivers and market conditions and trade policies that influenced our trade outcomes over 2021. This is actually my favorite of all of our reports, and it's a great quick reference summary of U.S. ag exports. So we hope that you'll visit that report on our webpage, and I hope you find it useful. Also, I want to highlight that FAS, in addition to our commodity circulars that are popular, we also publish international agricultural trade reports on our website on an ad hoc basis, covering topical agricultural trade issues. And on April 6th, we published a report on the factors contributing to high commodity prices and food insecurity, in addition to the Ukraine conflict. The report is a good summary of all of the factors that have brought us to where we find ourselves currently with global commodity markets. Also, a couple of points on GATS. In March 2022, FAS included revised commodity codes in the GATS database based on the release of the World Customs Organization's 7th edition updates to the harmonized system. Every 5 years, the WCO replaces, redefines, and recategorizes the HS codes, adapting to current trade patterns, as well as recognizing new products. The changes can be found on our code change page on the GATS website. Unfortunately, as some users may have noticed, we were a few days late in issuing the census data in March. And this was because of challenges we faced with implementing those new WCO codes. So we sincerely apologize for that, any inconvenience we may have caused to users. And we're definitely taking steps to eliminate any future delays in releasing our data. Also related to GATS, we have temporarily taken down our UN Comtrade data from the GATS system. The UN changed their data delivery system that we relied on to access that data. We're working with our IT staff now to transition our procedures to be able to access the data again. And we expect to have this work completed and restored sometime this summer. Also, want to mention with respect to Ukraine, we are utilizing all of our resources to track crop production impacts and subsequent trade forecasts. This consists of continuing to leverage in-country contacts as they are available and our remote sensing methodologies, among other data sources that we have to determine the potential production impacts to the current as well as future crops. we're using an all sources methodology approach to analysis, and this will all be reflected in the upcoming out year estimates in May for the major grains and oilseeds. Also want to highlight our crop production portal that's located on our iPad website. That's ipad.fas.usda.gov. This is maintained by our International Production Assessment Division. And this is a dynamic global crop production portal with key information, including our World Agricultural Production Briefs, commodity intelligence reports, several geospatial applications, crop production maps are there, as well as crop calendars at a subnational level for the top 20 producing countries. We've made substantial improvements across that portal, so I invite you to take a look. Our Crop Explorer tool on the portal was upgraded to monitor the latest crop conditions and seasonal rainfall for specific crops grown within our primary production states. You can also find crop maps there, drought information, vegetative indexes, crop calendars, soil moisture, as well as weather and precipitation data. From that portal, you can also access our GADIS system, which is a state-of-the-art geographical information system that integrates all of our Earth observation data with cropland data sets to facilitate agricultural and disaster assessments in an easy-to-use web-based format. So we invite you to visit the GADIS and please contact us if you have any questions or comments about that data. Finally, this year, we were able to enhance the search feature on our GAIN website. We've added some filters there that will allow the users to drill down into the search results a little better. And we hope that this will improve your experience with using GAIN. As always, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you have any questions about any of our data products or offerings, we love to interact with our stakeholders, and we're there to help you out with any questions about our information. So with that, turn it over to you, Mark.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Joe. Let me just, is it down? Oops, what did I do? Oop. Okay, yeah, all right. Good, all right, thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Joe. Nice to see so many of you here today. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Mark Jekanowski. I'm with the World Agricultural Outlook Board, and I'll just give you a quick overview of what we do at the board, how we're structured, how we're set up. World Board, as you probably know, very small agency. We're known for one thing. We have a very clear, tight mission, and that is to produce the WSDA report. Comes out monthly up on the screen there, where you find it. And as you probably also know, the new year starts in May. So with next month's report, we'll be putting out the first assessment of the new crop year for both domestic and international crops. So that's going to be a big one for us, as it always is. Joe, if you can go ahead and advance. Again, we're a pretty small agency, about 22 people in total, very flat organizational structure. All of our folks are either commodity analysts or meteorologists. So we house the USDA meteorology team, as well as the chairs for all of the interagency commodity estimates committees. So if you can go ahead, Joe. And so our role within the department is to run the interagency commodity estimates committees. And in that sense, we're really a coordinating agency. We work closely with all the folks up here on the panel with me, and some other agencies as well, collecting data, using data from across USDA and other government agencies to put together that WSDA on a monthly basis. We chair the committees, and there's 9 ICEC committees listed there, as you can see. And we are ultimately responsible for developing and agreeing to the final estimates on all of those, for all of those committees. Okay, a couple quick words on some personnel changes within the World Board. So recently, Justin Cho joined World Board, and he's with us here in the building today. Justin Cho joined the World Board a couple of years ago as a feed grains analyst. We moved him over to livestock, so he's working with Shale Shagum, who's also in the room with us today. And then we also have a couple job openings, advertisements that are either currently open or very soon to be open, including an advertisement for a macroeconomist and general ICEC support data analyst position within the World Board. This is a GS 13-14 position, so it's a fairly senior level, highly technical staff support. And we're also advertising for commodity analysts on the grains side to help with the grains ICEC, and that's also a 13-14 analyst. So that's a junior analyst that works with our senior commodity chairs. And I'll also note that our most recent hire in the board, Kevin Wittenberger, is also in the room with us. He's a food grains analyst who works with Mark Simone on the food grains team. All right, Joe, if you can advance. One other thing real quick, just like to mention, in addition to the WASD, while the WASD takes up most of our attention, most of our focus, we do also manage and organize and put on every year the Agricultural Outlook Forum for USDA. We had our forum this year. The title was New Paths to Sustainability and Productivity Growth. This was the second year in a row that the forum was fully virtual. And when we went to a virtual format last year, maybe not too surprisingly, we saw a big jump in attendance. The cost is free. There's no travel, so no cost to signing up. So last year, 2021, we had over 3,500 participants. This year, we were up near 6,000 participants. Again, fully virtual. And the entire event can still be seen. All of the presentations are online and viewable on demand. And you can see the links on my presentation there where you can find that event to go back and check out anything you might have missed. Okay, go ahead. Just a little bit more information about who attended. We had about 3,800 non-government folks from industry and academia attending the forum this year. That was up about 15% from last year, plus an additional an increase of about 1,000 folks from USDA as well. And go ahead, Joe, last slide here. Just to point out, we have the next year's conference on the calendar already, so mark your calendar, February 23rd and 24th. We expect to have virtual presence again next year, still trying to decide whether we're also going to have an in-person component. We certainly see there's a lot of value, there's a lot of interest in having some in-person networking opportunities. So we're going to kind of take it day by day, see what the COVID situation looks like, and then think through the logistics and make a decision sometime here in the months ahead. But regardless, forum will be held February 23rd and 24th, and hope to see many of you there, either in person or virtually. And with that, I am going to wrap things up and hand it over to Dan Prestis from NASS.
Okay. Mark, if you want to hand Dan the clicker there. I just want to remind the folks that are logged into the call or that are out in the virtual world that you're welcome to go ahead and start putting questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to them when we get started with the Q&A. Dan?
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Karestas, Director of Statistics Division at NASS. I'm going to cover some of the new items that have come about since our fall meeting last year. Beginning with crops. NASS conducted a hemp survey last fall. We released a report in February of 2022. Information was published on acreage, yield, production, price, and value of hemp in the United States. We're planning another release in early 2023. NASS conducted a review of the floriculture program, and we are planning to expand coverage to a 50-state program, adding 25 new crops. Also planning to publish retail, wholesale, and total sales. The next floriculture report will be published on May 25th, 2022. We began a review of the grain stocks program in late 2020. Recommendations from that program are currently being reviewed and studied for further action. In March, we began live streaming the Secretary's quarterly briefings for prospective plantings and grain stocks. We'll plan to continue that and add the other acreage reports and crop production reports. Live streaming begins for crops at 12:05 p.m. Looking at economics, we will release the second report in the data series of local foods in April. Information will be provided on the marketing of locally and regionally produced agricultural products. We have 2 chemical usage reports this year. For field crops, we are highlighting corn, rice, and cotton. The chemical usage report for fruit will cover multiple commodities. In August, we will release the cash rents information. We plan to continue the approach of using Bayesian small area models to produce the county level acre totals and rental rates. Continuing with economics, the Conservation Practices Adoption Motivation Survey is a 2-year cooperative effort with NRCS to measure farmers and ranchers' conservation practices, adoption behaviors, and adoption reasons on cropland, grazing land, forest land, and concentrated livestock feeding operations. The focus of the 2022 release is crops and livestock conservation practices. We will be continuing the organic survey that is released in December. State and national level data for organic crops, livestock, and marketing production process practices will be released. The big addition to this is that live streaming will be done for local foods and organic releases. Live streaming will begin at 3:05 p.m. Moving to livestock. For poultry slaughter, the tables that include the condemned postmortem cause, by cause, and type now include unknown. And this was done to align the NASS publication with the Food Safety and Inspection Services poultry systems. In March, we began live streaming the Secretary's quarterly briefings for hogs and pigs. We plan to continue that and add the January and July cattle reports. Live streaming begins at 3:05 p.m. Last June, we began doing stat chat on Twitter for livestock releases. Stat chat follows 1 hour after the release time. So for livestock, that means a 4 p.m. Eastern time. Looking at the Census of Agriculture, in December 2021, NASS mailed the National Agricultural Classification Survey to build the census mail list to ensure coverage of all farmers and ranchers. In late 2022, NASS will mail the Census of Agriculture to over 3 million farms and ranchers. We are hoping that more farmers use the online reporting. That can be done via cell phone, laptop, and iPad. NASS will also be using previously reported data for those who respond online. So if a producer has responded recently to a NASS survey, that information will be pre-filled for those items, easing the completion of the census form. Lastly, looking at modernization at NASS. NASS has released a respondent portal that makes responding to NASS surveys easier. A centralized point for responding to all NASS surveys and the ability to create a user account. Once a user account is established, a respondent can see past survey responses to aid in completing the questionnaire. We are also in the process of building a new dissemination system. This approach will change how NASS releases the data to the public and make the querying of data easier and quicker. We are doing this in stages, with the first stage, a dairy landing page, being released in 2022 to the public. That landing page will contain information on milk production, milk PDI, cattle, cold storage, dairy products, and organic data. We have additional landing pages coming in 2023 for economics, field crops, livestock, and aquaculture. In closing, just a reminder that all reports are available at the NASS website, and we are always willing to take questions via phone or internet. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kelly McGuire. I am the Assistant Administrator at USDA's Economic Research Service, and I'm glad to be with you today. I'm going to give you a high-level overview of ERS and then some of the new work that we have ongoing since our last meeting. Just as a reminder for those of you who are familiar with ERS, or as some new information if you're new to Data Users Conference or ERS in general. ERS, our mission is to anticipate trends and emerging issues across the agricultural sector. That includes the food economy, the environment, and rural America in general. We produce high quality work, of course, but importantly, the work that we produce is considered objective. And so we don't make policy recommendations, we don't provide policy advice, rather we provide the data and the analysis and the information that can be used to inform policy decisions. And that is as part of our mission, in particular is part of our role as one of the 13 principal federal statistical agencies. NASS is a sister statistical agency within the Department of Agriculture. And we take those roles and responsibilities very seriously, and that objectivity is one of those components for ERS. Just at a high level, to give you an overview of areas in which we focus our work, we have a pretty strong research program on the farm economy in general. In particular, we put out a farm income forecast 3 times a year. So the most recent forecast was released in early February of this year, and then the next forecast will occur in September. So those data are available on our website, or you can listen to the webinar if you'd like, and there's a report that accompanies that forecast that's released. My eyesight is not that great, so I can't see all the way over there. I'm going to turn around for a second. Excuse me. Another part of our research program is on the rural economy. This extends beyond the agricultural sector. So lately we've been doing quite a bit of work looking at employment in rural areas compared to urban areas, and tracking that throughout the pandemic. And then we also have a pretty strong research program on global markets and trade. And so right now, a lot of work is going into working on and doing analysis related to the impacts of the Ukraine conflict on trade patterns and such. So that's a big part of our research program. Just 3 other areas. We do quite a bit of work on food safety, as well as food access and nutrition. And then finally, I'll mention conservation and the environment programs. We have a lot of research on conservation programs in general. Lately, we've been pivoting and doing a lot of work in the climate space and understanding the data that are needed and the modeling that is needed in order to understand the impacts of a changing climate on the agricultural sector. We have a lot of foundational data and data products available. We have about 80 data products that we post on our website, and an equal number of data assets we use in order to do the analysis there. Really a workhorse for the data and the work that we do is the Agricultural Resource Management Survey, which we do in collaboration with NASS. And so we're continually looking at that survey and working on questions that need to be included on that survey in order to answer the most pressing issues for the agricultural sector. So that's a survey that goes out both at the field level and the farm level every year across different commodity and livestock groups. I also note here that we have the food acquisition and household purchase survey. This is a survey that we last did 10 years ago and is a really important way for us to better understand how people are accessing food and what they're accessing. And we're in the process of releasing a pilot very soon. We just received approval to release the pilot of that survey in the coming months to collect new data. And we've introduced quite a bit of new technology, so that survey will have a component where you can respond to it via a mobile app that will actually also track where you're located to identify how people are accessing food, not just what they're accessing. So that's pretty exciting research project on the horizon. I've highlighted some of our data products here. I wouldn't want to take the time to go into all of them, but these are some of the highlights that might be of interest to you. They're all available on our website, and I can certainly answer questions if folks have them about some of these different data products. A few things that I want to note that are new. So one of our sort of most popular products that we put out is our daily charts of note. So for the last couple of years, those have been coming out on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We've upped it to 4 days a week, and we're working towards the capacity to move to 5 days a week very soon. So this is a chart that comes out daily. It's just one chart from one of our research products with about 200 words of text describing that chart, and it's now available as a mobile app. So you can download it onto your iPhone or to your Android device. You get that chart delivered to your phone daily, and then you can scroll through and see all of the historic charts as well. It has a search feature. It's really, it's a great way to just kind of get a snapshot of what ERS is working on right at the moment. The second product that I'll mention are the Amber Waves. This is our online magazine, and we're up to putting out about 10 or 12 articles a month. And these are sort of a pithier version of our longer reports that are a little bit less technical. They're about 4 to 10 pages, dive into a particular issue or topic, and synthesize the information that's in our reports. And we try to roll those out across the month, so there's always fresh content for you to look at. And then finally, our ERS reports are sort of the bread and butter of what we do and what we release. There are some thumbnail sketches in the booklet that you have with you, or the PDF that you're online, starting on page 20 with a lot of our recent releases. And you can go and link to those and read them further if you would like. Just noting that we try to engage with stakeholders continuously and in a variety of different ways throughout the development of the work that we do. So we'd love to hear from you and what the most pressing issues are for us to work on. So we definitely welcome feedback in many different ways. I have some contact information on the last slide. We engage in some formal ways of interacting with stakeholders through some deep dives into various research programs periodically, but we also try to find ways to continuously engage so that we're making sure that we're delivering the research that's most relevant for your needs. Just I think this might be my last slide, just a few topics that we pivoted to recently. COVID-19 is still part of our research agenda. We had launched a working paper series at the beginning of the pandemic to be able to release some peer-reviewed information very quickly, much more expeditiously than our normal reports take to develop. We have about 15 of those up on our website looking at all aspects of the pandemic on agricultural sector. Climate change, I mentioned, is an area that we're really investing a lot in, making sure that we have the data and models available to do the analysis that's needed. Economic growth, of course, is very important. And we've also started engaging more in terms of looking at racial equity. We have some research that we're doing now on heirs property and how that property is transferred across generations and how that has affected the composition of the agricultural sector. So just questions, if you have my contact information is here, ways to interact with ERS. So thank you. Pass it along.
No slides. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Walter from the Farm Service Agency. I'm our data analytics officer, and I work in the administrator's office. Pretty recent new position for me, or new position to the agency, but ultimately my position is in charge of the data strategy and bringing all of our deputy areas together into a singular vision of modernizing our data resources across FSA. So today, I wanted to give you a little bit of update what Farm Service Agency has had going on in the last 6 months since the last meeting, and give you a little taste of what's to come and talk about a couple data specific issues as well. As recently in this past March, we concluded our 2022 our agricultural risk coverage and price loss coverage, which is one of the cornerstone farm bill programs that we had. It's out there to 3 safety nets on our historic covered commodities or row crops. And it covers about 246 million acres on about 1.9 million acres of farm. So it's a great safety net. This past year, or this past October, since our last meeting, we paid a little over $2 billion out on 2020 losses. And this is one of those programs that all depends on mainly revenue based and pay when the revenue is down, and we pay after the marketing year is over. Another big order of work is we just concluded a general CRP sign up that concluded back into March. Very successful sign up that they're in the process of ranking and deciding who gets into that program to start next October. And that concluded back in March, and pretty much a couple days later, we started with a grassland reserve or CRP grasslands sign up. For those, that's more of a working lands program, but that's ongoing, runs between now and the middle of May. So that's, 2 very big farm bill related programs that we had, and in a normal year, or rewind maybe 3 years, in a normal year, what used to be a normal year of FSA, that would have been a lot for our employees to handle. But in the meantime, we still keep administering pandemic relief. And really since our last meeting, we've rolled out the Organic Transition Education Certification Program, which it was a cost share program that covered some of the transitional costs for producers to transition to organic production. So that's rolled out. We've also done the Spot Market Hog program, which is another pandemic assistance for producers. And it basically filled a gap that was originally missed in some of our other assistance. So really provided assistance to hog producers who sold hogs through negotiated sales between April 16th and September 1st of 2020. That program's rolled out and is pretty much concluded for us with a little bit better than $2 million going out the door on that one. We've also rolled out the pandemic assistance for timber harvesters and haulers. So this impacted kind of a non-traditional FSA customer base, more of our timber industry rather than our normal, ag producers from a row crop or a field or a livestock point of view. And we put out about $20 million to loggers and log truckers who experienced gross revenue loss of at least 10% between January of 2020 and December of 2020 compared to the same period the year before. So it bridged that gap that those folks experienced during the pandemic. And I think the last one we've kind of wrapped up with is the Pandemic Livestock Indemnity Program. And that provided payments to producers for losses in livestock due to depopulation between March of 2020 and December of 2022. And payments were about 80% of the fair market value of those livestock and poultry that they would have received. And that was about a $47 million program. So like I said, in a normal given year, ARC PLC and CRP programs would have kept our employees busy, but they put out work on four main pandemic related programs to help get more dollars out there. We're also getting ready, from some upcoming programs. We have the Emergency Livestock Relief Program, and that's a program for forage losses due to drought and wildfire in 2021. And these for folks that received emergency relief payments through our ERP program. So it's a supplemental program to make up for some of those additional losses that we see. So that's a 2-phase program. The initial phase has gone out. It's put out about just shy of $600 million so far, and they're buttoning up the rules on the rest of it to qualify to aim to somewhere around about $750 million in that program. We're expected to go out to livestock producers. And then probably the big order of business that we have coming up is the Emergency Relief Program for crop and assistance producers. So again, this is going to be a 2-phase disaster program that covers crop disaster losses from the years 2020 or 2021. And it's going to roll out with initial phase utilizing some data from Risk Management Agency and also internal from what we had from our non-insured assistance program to get a payment out the door, and then a application period for those that didn't participate in one of those 2 other programs to then get a payment for that. So that's anticipated to roll out in the next couple months. I know a couple of people that are very actively working on that program and trying to, as rapidly as possible, pull all that together to start implementing that and getting dollars out the door. So it's been an extremely busy year for FSA. really been an extremely busy 6 months, and kind of doesn't look like it's going to let up for the next 6 months as well. So that's kind of an agency update. More on a data specific topics. Through my job, my day-to-day job is working on our modernization efforts. FSA has made a big commitment from a data standpoint and from an IT standpoint to modernize, de-silo our data, so to speak. We run a lot of different programs between farm loans and farm programs, and doing a job to modernize and centralize, get all of our, the main goal is to get all of our data into one place. Make it easier for ourselves to do that analysis, make it easier to coordinate with our friends at the table when we have to share our data with them for their analysis. But the main part is to get that out of the silo. In part of that commitment is also making it easier to expose to you guys as appropriate. Developing more dashboards that are external facing when we roll out big programs, to be able to put that data out there for the consumer as appropriate. That's a big commitment that we've made, and you're going to start seeing, I think, with the ERP program of having that external facing. We did that with the coronavirus programs that we had. It seemed to be very successful, and you could really honestly see the burden shift from especially our FOIA office. If the data's out there, there's a lot less FOIA requests, there's a lot less for them to process. It's just a lot easier. So continuing that commitment in our IT investment in that modernization is really a key piece to that. In kind of also in a very short-term approach, about 3 weeks ago, we rolled out our online data resource page. So FSA, we were very siloed in our website of where our data was located. And many of you probably go out to certain areas in the past, but what we wanted to do is make a collective landing page. If you looked at our structure of our website and you wanted some CRP data, you went to the CRP program, you drilled down, there were some reports, great. You did the same for our PLC, you did the same for farm loan, you name it. There's always data there someplace, but you always had to pick up the rock for the particular program you were looking for and look under that rock. So we left all that alone to not worry anybody and to not, move anybody's data around on them. But we also created a centralized landing page where every resource that we have online is now built into a landing page. So for those of you familiar with our website, fsa.usda.gov, in the top, there's a link to online resources. And on the online resources is our data resource page. And you're able to go there regardless of program you're looking for. It lists out what we have. It's kind of, built into a table structure of the program, the report, and then the link, and it takes you right to it. So we really wanted, that was a lot of producer feedback or a lot of external customer feedback of just making it a lot easier and exposing a lot of our data. We have a lot of people that work on those reports, and they do a very good job in their own silos. So again, just kind of a way that we're trying to de-silo the agency and make our data a lot more accessible to the general public and a lot more easier to find. So, and that's all I had for updates for today. And I believe I'm passing it to Janet.
That's right. I think virtually passing it to Janet. Is that right? Janet Linder?
Yes.
We
They
can
are.
see you fine in the room. So I think I'm going to tell me when to move your slide.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for allowing me to join virtually. It would have been nice to be there with everyone, but this is good too. Thank you so much. I'm Janet Linder. I'm with Dairy Market News, the director of our market news program here. So I just wanted to provide you with a few updates. So if you could go to the next slide. Just looking at some of the international markets of interest, things that we're continuing to cover despite pandemic challenges and things like that, and some updates on Mars and the poultry and egg reporting. Next slide, please. So let me see here. Market news captures and makes public market information selected from wholesale markets in key trading partner nations. And we partner with and lead efforts to improve the availability and reliability of agricultural market information. These shared efforts and partnerships have led to the development of information products and tools that benefit everyone. Next slide, please. 3 of the 4 market news divisions are actively partnering with counterparts within similar institutions in their countries, as well as tracking the most significant commodity markets. Next slide, please. Shipping Point markets for imports are reported by our specialty crops reporters through direct interviews and exchanges of information with the primary buyers and sellers. Price and volume reports are generally issued on a daily basis for these major commodities at the border crossing or point of entry. Wholesale markets in other countries are mostly captured from the websites of our counterparts. And Market News tracks movement for over 700 specialty crop products, which includes domestic shipments and imports and crossings from Canada and Mexico. And there are approximately 75 countries of origin shown by Market News for specialty crops. Next slide, please. Updated market reports are added as responses to industry requests, as well as to enhance capturing market information on existing products. Specialty crops transition to using the Automated Commercial Environment, or ACE system, as a primary source of import data, starting with the northern border in January of 2020. ACE uses harmonized tariff codes from the International Trade Commission. And in 2021, specialty crops continued that transition to
Hey,
ACE
Janet,
for all.
I think I'm
Yes.
off on your slides just a little bit here in the room. Let me see if I can get this straight.
I think you're right.
Ah, yeah. Well, that one's. Marissa? Go back one. Now we're square. Yeah,
Okay.
got it. Okay, sorry about that. Operator error.
Okay. Well, you're not flying in an airplane. It'll be okay. So in 2021, specialty crops continued the transition to ACE for all of their points and ports of entry, excluding Mexico crossings from Nogales, Arizona. And newly obtained HTS codes include organic berries, cilantro, tomatillos, and green onions. And other requests have also been submitted to the committee, and we're looking forward to their response on that. Next slide, please. So Dairy Market News publishes more than 60 weekly domestic regional dairy reports, and we added in international reporting in 1992, organic in 2029, and retail in 2012. And there are limited sources of information available on the world markets, and many regions have no or limited data. But our international reports are collected the same way as for the domestic markets by talking to contacts in those regions to collect information. The report data include pricing series for comparisons among regions, and additional commentary on current international trade issues usually include production, quota, tariffs, stocks, intervention, shipping, embargo, and weather. Next slide, please. And in addition to market prices, we also include commentary on what is happening in the market during the reporting period. And the comments try to explain the price changes and market tone, and note the trends for production and stocks, and list the factors affecting supply and demand, and explain how other markets are affecting each other, and present statistics in meaningful and understandable language. Next slide, please. All right. Livestock, Poultry, Grain Market News has several reports that provide international data for imports, exports, as well as a few reports that display market information from Mexico, Canada, and Japan. International data is collected in multiple ways through voluntary and mandatory reporting, collaborations with other USDA agencies, or outside agricultural organizations such as Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. For information on import information, for example, live cattle for slaughter, there are reports 142, 152, and 154. For swine, reports 214, 216, 217, 218, and 234. There are also reports for beef, feeder cattle imports from Mexico, feeder pigs, Canadian live animal imports by destination or state of entry, and imported meat passed for entry into the US. Next slide. For exports, you can view a report for pork in reports 640 and 641. Beef has report 463. And there are reports for exports to Mexico on cattle, hogs, sheep, goats, horses, and exotics, and national mechanically separated chicken. Next slide, please. Other international information includes the Canadian livestock prices and federally inspected slaughter, Canadian egg market, live poultry slaughtered under federal inspection for USA and Canada. And next slide, please. One of the bigger achievements this year was the livestock poultry grain mobile app, which was launched earlier this year. It offers free iOS and Android versions, and those are available as downloads from Apple and the Google Play stores. It provides instant access to nearly 800 livestock, poultry, and grain market reports from both voluntary and livestock mandatory reporting sources. Allows users to search for current and historical reports from both voluntary and mandatory report sources. You can also search by location, state, or commodity. Version 2.0 is expected to be released by midsummer and will add market information for other commodities. And it is part of a multi-year initiative by Market News to provide easier access to data using the latest media technologies. Next slide, please. The Market Information Organization of the Americas, or MIOA, was an AMS initiative to develop a multilateral relationship with market information specialists from all of the nations of the Western Hemisphere. And the idea was to harmonize and create a mechanism for the timely and consistent exchange of information to the benefits of all. AMS is currently serving as the chair of MIOA, and along with FAS, it is a key funding partner. The Inter-American Institution for Cooperation on Agriculture serves as the technical secretariat for MIOA and is also a critical partner in the efforts of the organization. Next slide, please. The challenges of these international partnerships are both long and episodic, as governments can change and do change, and may have an unforeseen impact on the key information specialists who have long been a resource in that country, both for their ministry and for MIOA. Next slide, please. AMS Market News has been in existence for over 100 years and is widely viewed as the gold standard for agricultural market information around the world. And by serving as a leader, a trainer, and an implementer of key activities within the network of 33 nations, Market News is directly influencing how markets are covered and reported and how that information is made public. And this greater market transparency is a benefit to all. Next slide, please. MIOA has served as a conduit for regions within the hemisphere to align and create shared information products such as Simagro. Our hope is that eventually we will have a shared platform or dashboard for data visualization for all of the MIOA nations, and this will directly benefit public data users regardless of where they are located. Next slide. AMS has been partnering with its colleagues, not only in the MIOA arena, but also in improving transparency of import data for specific products of interest. And these two lists show the supporting or complementary requests made to the ITC requesting that additional codes be added for these specific products. Next slide, please. And here are the websites for the respective organizations mentioned earlier. Next slide. And voluntary poultry and egg reporting continues to offer regular updates. These reports will be transitioned to the My Market News platform, and reports will have a new format and API capabilities. Next slide. The egg and chicken reports continue to offer consolidated area and regional reporting. Next slide, please. And the same is true for the turkey reporting. Next slide, please. Thank you very much.
We'll move on to Joe DeCampo.
Hello, can everybody see me?
Not, yeah, we can certainly hear you, Joe, in the room, and I think the folks on the web can see and hear you.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'll keep this brief so we can move on to the main event here. I am Joseph DeCampo with the U.S. Census Bureau. Sorry I couldn't be there with you all today, but as always, I'd like to thank our colleagues at the USDA for inviting us to be a part of this event. I am the section supervisor over foods and textiles in the International Trade Indicator Microanalysis branch of the Economic Indicators Division. Our group analyzes the underlying import and export data that goes into the monthly International Trade in Goods and Services press release, the FT 900, which is a joint release with Stats Canada and the Bureau of Economic Analysis. As I'm sure you all know, you have it marked on your calendars. We will be releasing our March trade data on May 4th. And as always, all of our trade data is available for free on USA Trade online. Thank you.
All right. So just a thank you to all the panelists. So again, if you have questions and you're out there on the call, there's a couple hundred of you. We'll answer questions here live by panelists, and our virtual attendees can submit questions through the Q&A button. And our in-person attendees, let's see, I'm going to ask our cameraman, if we pass the microphone, are you going to be able to handle that? He says yes. Okay, so we won't make you come down to the mic. We'll bring a microphone to you. I've got a couple of questions already in the Q&A, but I'll check here in the room and see if we have anybody that wants to give a start with a question. Adam, you want to see if you got anybody you want to hand a mic to? There's one. First shooter, Jerry Goodell. Did you put on makeup for the camera today, Jerry? No. Okay.
Yes, my name is Jerry Goodell. I've been at this meeting for many years. I guess the one thing I'd like to kind of bring out an issue that's been going on in the USDA and particularly ERS over the last two or 3 years. I know it's been a tough transition and that from having everybody in Washington to have people in Kansas City and things of that nature and that. And so I've had some issues this last week when we didn't have everything kind of lined up. I know you're even having some new transitions or new technology and things like that out there. So I'd just love to feel a little bit of a general response from our ERS person here about what they feel and how things are kind of working together for us here on being able to get our, what I use at least, the oil crops, feed crop, post-report type situations. There was some transitional issues that didn't appear like they should have this last week, but that's, it's growing. We all have these issues, but I just have to see, or at least get a response back from you as to how you feel about how things are going and how this coordination between two locations is working out.
Sure. Great. Thanks for the question. So yes, so just to kind of give you a little bit of a, lay of the land for ERS. We have probably about 285 staff right now, which is a little bit higher than where we were pre-relocation. So that would have been like the October 2019 standpoint. Now, we were low in October 2019, so being at 285 is great. That kind of brings us back up to where we were at that point, but we anticipate hiring probably another 20 or 30 people in the next year or so. So that would kind of bring us up to what we would call a full capacity. We've hired all of our management positions down to the first line supervisor level. The last first line supervisor started just yesterday. So we have all of those positions filled, senior management down to first line supervisor. So that is fantastic. And then we've filled all of our sort of critical foundational needs. So all of our Outlook economists, for example, those positions are all filled. So now it's just kind of figuring out what additional capacity we need based on where the needs lie. So that's kind of the logistics of the agency and staffing. What we're thrilled about is that we brought in so many people who have new ideas, fresh perspectives, great energy. So it's kind of an exciting time to be at ERS. These staff that we've hired are, folks who are fresh out of graduate school, all the way through kind of mid to later in their career level. So our administrator, for example, who's been with us now about 2 years, Spiro Stefano, he was an academic for 37 years and has joined us, and so brings great experience to the agency. Let's see, location. So we went to 2 locations in October 2019, Kansas City and Washington, D.C. And then about 6 months later, the pandemic hit. And so we all went to these what we call remote duty stations, which is a phrase I'd never heard of prior to that time. And then the Secretary of Agriculture has moved the entire department to remote duty stations for positions where those are, those jobs can be done in a remote environment. So going forward, the agency is going to be mostly remote. We'll probably have about 25 or 30 people who will physically report to offices in Washington, D.C., probably about 40 people who will physically report to the office in Kansas City. And the rest of the agency will work from remote duty stations, that being their home. And so that's the way the department's going. That's not just an ERS decision, but that's a move across the department. It works. We've been really productive. We're putting everything out that we're supposed to. So, and technology makes that a little bit more seamless than it might have been a couple of years ago. There are hiccups. You noted that there were some delays in getting the data that you were talking about from the wheat and the oil crops reports uploaded to the Cornell Mann Library and ERS. I think those things have been worked out, and we certainly take note of those when they occur so we can make adjustments going forward. And then the final thing I'll say, and then I'll stop because Joe's probably ready for me to move on, is that we also, especially with all the new talent coming in, are working on these modernization efforts, ways in which we can make our data more accessible and more easily available to folks. So we have what we call an Outlook modernization project that we're working on, where we're pilot testing new ways to make our Outlook products available. And so that's something that we're in the process of working on now. Hopefully that.
Ken, what I was interested, one additional question, I guess, a follow-up, is what portion of your ERS staff, you talked about 280 kind of plus people, is split up between Washington and now Kansas City. Now, I know that the people that might be assigned to Kansas City might not be in Kansas City, since we just responded to this, but because I think that's going to be interesting as to, from, as we all know, the office has its benefits, but it also has its distractions. So I guess from your point of view, what's the proportion out there?
Yeah, so out of those 285 people, I think there are right now probably about 40 people who will be going into the office in Kansas City and about 30 in DC. The numbers shift a little bit because people are still making decisions and such, but that's about where we'll land, and the rest of the folks will do their jobs remotely.
Okay, I'm going to move on to a pre-submitted question, and I think it'll go towards Mark. This comes from Paul McAuliffe. Can you explain why WASDE did not change the April 8 USDA Ukraine corn planted acres, harvested acres, or yield given the war in Ukraine that started February 25?
Yeah, sure. So as I noted in my presentation at the beginning, our new year starts in May. So what you're seeing in the April WASD is the most recent crops you're seeing there are the 21-22 crop, the current crop that's still being marketed. It was produced back, harvested back in, last fall. So, the war, which started in September, I'm sorry, started in February, didn't affect the estimate of the crops that were produced last September or last fall. So next month, May, you'll start to see some new estimates for production and yield for US and all the global countries, for Black Sea and the rest of the regions. But as of right now, through April, we're still just looking at last year's crops, and that those crops have been harvested. The production has already occurred. So there is, no basis on which to change the production estimates from crops that were harvested last fall.
Okay, great, thanks. I'm gonna do one more from the virtual world and then come back to the room. This one is from Thomas Rudder, and I'll need a little help from my panelists to figure out who might address this question. Are food and feed interchangeable in your world? Are reports available for mycotoxins, for example? And a follow-up is, my question refers to safety, feed safety for our livestock. Do I stump the band?
Well, wait.
Mycotoxins, like aflatoxin.
Can you repeat it?
Are food and feed interchangeable in your world? And then I think the core of the question is, are reports available for mycotoxins, for instance? I might look to my folks at AMS. Do we have data on aflatoxin and such from grain inspection? I'm waiting for one of my virtual panelists to raise a hand, maybe. We may circle back to that one. I suspect that there are some data from inspections or otherwise that would be possible. All right, I'm going to come back to the room. Yes, please. Mic might be off.
So my question has to be with, or has to do with APHIS, and I'm not sure if anybody here kind of covers it, but it's specifically about bird flu and the data that's provided pretty regularly on occurrences and condemnations and so forth. Would it be possible to have an updated data set that can be easily downloaded and then used? At this point, you have to do a few steps. You have to, there's a drop-down menu, copy and paste, which is fairly basic at this point. And so if that would be something that could be provided fairly quickly, would certainly make the job of analyzing the data easier and eliminate any errors. And the other part of it is, if we see any errors in the data, misspellings, for instance, is there a way to submit feedback? Because it seems at this point, you have to, there's just an occurrence there that every time I download the data, I have to remember to go and correct the spelling. Otherwise it will, it just wouldn't work. So.
To my knowledge, we don't have anyone from APHIS with us today, but that's something that we can take a note and let them know that point is out there. And if they could create an API or some sort of connection that would make it easier to get the data.
A CSV file or
yeah.
just something that you can just download rather than have to do a copy and
Easier
paste.
to pull it down. Okay. Right.
Got a lag and this comes on. Dale Dirkholz at Grain Cycles. This is for you, Patrick. This is one thing that's been a little bit of an irritant over quite a number of years. It's nothing really huge. But you guys are putting a lot more emphasis on looking at some of this world crop data in FAS, and I'm talking about your iPad app, et cetera. And, you know, we could talk about the old Crop Explorer. The one thing I would suggest is that I think on the main FAS homepage, there needs to be a more obvious link where we could go from the FAS home right over to those particular venues there. It'd be a lot more useful to a lot of us out there instead of, you know, Crop Explorer. Through the years, I've learned I just go and do a search for Crop Explorer, then go on and jump over. But why hasn't anybody ever addressed putting a direct link into some of these? And now with everything you're doing with some of these world production estimates there and a lot of the graphics, it'd be helpful, I think, to a lot of people. I think you would also get a lot more visibility of them if there was an easy way to just directly jump.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. I really appreciate it. I agree with you 100%. This is something we're talking about now, working with our folks in public affairs within FAS. You know, in the past, there's been a number of reasons. I won't bore you with all of that now, but I definitely take your point. It's something we want to do. And I think it's in our short-term future that we'll integrate that website better with the rest of the FAS website. It's something we definitely want to take care of. But I appreciate you raising it. Gives me some energy and momentum to take back to Washington to get it done faster.
Oh, I didn't like to make things easy.
So I know there's a question out there from Jerry Cessna. He said, reports I have 2 dairy items on my NASS wish list. So Jerry, if I assume that you're only in the virtual world, so I don't know if Lakia, if you want to see if he might want to come off, promote him so he can ask his question verbally, or if he wants to type more. While we're waiting for that, I'm going to jump down to another question. This is from Mark Fay from Gamma Q in Dallas. For the trend line yield of corn and beans, do you feel it's more difficult to reach or beat it even with ideal weather because the marginal increase on seed planting machinery technologies is reaching a limitation? Looking forward to see what May WASDE will start with its yield estimates. Mark, I'll let you start.
Hey, can you repeat the whole thing?
Sure.
Yeah, just-
Mark Fay from Gamma Q in Dallas. For trend line yield of corn and beans, do you feel it's more difficult to reach or beat it even with ideal weather because of the marginal increase on seed planting machinery technologies is reaching a limitation? Looking forward to see what the May WASDE will start with its yield estimates.
I'm gonna see if, is Mike Jewison, are you on?
Mike, it should be out there. I see him. He's coming off mute. Yep.
I'm here. I'm here.
Can you say a few words?
I would just reiterate that the methodology that we generally use for corn and beans is published online. A paper I did with Paul Westcott about a decade ago now. And to stay tuned for the May WASDE. We're always obviously evaluating all current information as best we can.
Okay. I'll do one more off the web, and then we'll come back and see if anybody's talkative here in the room. It says, Jerry, I have 2 dairy items on my NASS wish list. 1, we need better information about processed cheese and dairy products that are very similar to processed cheese. By definition, processed cheese is made from natural cheese. However, there are some dairy products that most people think of as processed cheese, but they are made of milk protein or other dairy ingredients and may not contain any natural cheese. These includes products such as Velveeta, cheese-like slices that people put on sandwiches, etc. These products are called cheese product instead of processed cheese. It would be good to have a separate reporting for each type of product. It would help us with accounting for how milk components are being used. I'll stop there. And Travis, you have a comment before I go on? So basically Velveeta is different than other stuff. And if you want to understand how you fraction the milk, it'd be good to have a breakout. I think that's what I heard. Stump the band.
not sure exactly what he wants detail wise on us to ask questions for the producers of the dairy plants to provide for that. But we're open to the concept if he can reach out to us and we can talk more about that options where we can provide that data if possible. It goes back to our dairy plants being able to provide the data in a manner that will be able to be published on a monthly or annual basis. So that's another factor that comes into our reports is the frequency and the volume of the data that would actually be usable for the end product.
Okay, here's part two. It would be good if we had data on stocks of skim milk powder. If there are not enough reporters to report that specific data, perhaps stocks of non-fat dry milk plus skim milk powder could be reported as one aggregate number each month.
This has been a question we've been looking into because he's asked us in the past. And unfortunately, at this time right now, we don't have the collaboration from our respondents to provide it in that manner at this time. So unfortunately, that is a no, but it's not something that we will revisit as necessary for the reports.
Okay. Let's go back to the room. Hi.
Caitlin McCulloch, Livestock Marketing Information Center. Well, first of all, I want to say it's very good to see all of you here as well as all the participants. And I know it's been a challenging couple of years and the industry just really appreciate you guys pivoting to a virtual setting and then coming back here again in person. So thank you. My first couple of questions go to USDA AMS. So Janet, if you're ready. So we have, I guess my question is when the following reports will be available through the API, and then I have a follow-up question to that. So the ones we're looking at right now specifically are the National Bison Report, the Grass-Fed Lamb and Goat Report, the National Grass-Fed Beef Report, and then the Daily Ethanol Report. And then probably a follow-up to that is the National Weekly Direct Beef Type Distribution of fed cattle was released recently in PDF form, but then was not added to the API. So it was a new PDF. And is that something we should expect moving forward? Are PDFs going to be put out without the data being put in APIs in some cases? And how do we make that distinction? I know I'm asking about Mars and the LMR database in one question, but if you could help me out here.
So those are some really good questions, and we'll actually need to reach out to someone from Livestock Poultry Grain Market News, as they would be the people to really handle that question. And we can certainly get back to the person probably shortly after this meeting. I don't have that information. And so I'm sorry about that, but that's more on the livestock poultry grain side of things.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Carl Skold, I just had a few questions. Patrick, you might have covered this in your opening. I missed the first few minutes, but apologize. One was just on the weekly both beef, pork shipments and sales. You know, we've had, especially on the beef side, some fairly large revisions, and those revisions get popped into 1 week. So maybe kind of what's going on with that, both on kind of improving that data, and then also why aren't the revisions put in where they should go? And then I had a question for Janet on AMS on the import data, the weekly imports. Is it available, or can we get those data available where we can download the whole series and also get more information, because imports are becoming a pretty larger role in both pork and beef.
Patrick, you want to go first?
Yes, I will, but I will ask our export sales lead person on our export sales office if she'd like to come on the mic and explain about the corrections that you're asking about in the beef for the export sales. Amy, are you there?
I am. I'm sorry. Could you just repeat that question one more time, please?
I think my question was around, on the porks, been not as reliable of indicator on pork sales and shipments, and the beef has kind of become less reliable. And also we've had some fairly large weekly revisions. I'm guessing it's exporters not reporting or reporting late. And so the question is, maybe can you talk about what's going on with reporting of those data? Then also when we see large revisions, those get stuck in 1 week. So they're unrealistic, and maybe have you thought about trying to revise the data so they go where they should go? With if a sales was made last week and then it doesn't get reported till October, why don't you put it in the week the week in April?
Yeah, we have had some late reporting of pork and beef. We don't necessarily, though, go back to prior weeks and correct that information, unfortunately. And it is a case, if sometimes, if somebody happens to be out with the exporter company that does their regular reporting, it doesn't get done by an alternate person. It's nothing intentional that we have found. And there really is no way to go back to the original time frame in our system to update those figures that happened during a certain time frame prior to when they were reported, unfortunately.
Yeah, I guess that's maybe something that we could take a look at going down the road in the future to see if there's any way within our system, or if we are able to upgrade in any way to be able to reflect the sales when they actually occurred rather than when they get reported. So it's something we can look at, but unfortunately right now, it seems that we're not equipped to be able to do it at the moment.
Okay, and Janet, do you have, are you able to answer that question? Or do you have anybody on the call that can? Would you like it repeated?
I would like it repeated. I don't believe I have anyone on the call that could handle that, but we certainly want to be able to respond to the question. So we may need some contact information as well. Maybe that could get put into the Q&A with an email address or.
And we will have we'll have a full transcript, so we'll be able to go back and give you those questions after the meeting. So we'll be after you to answer the questions. So.
Sounds good.
Okay, go ahead. You want to go ahead and repeat, and then in case she can.
Question was around the AMS reports the weekly imports for beef and pork, and those data are on a PDF, unfortunately, and I don't know if they're available elsewhere, but maybe is there a way to get those included so we can download the data and get that more of a electronic copy rather than just a PDF, and just both the history. And the second part of the question really is getting more detail on what's being imported across the board on those weekly numbers as well.
Okay. We'll check on that and get back to you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to bounce out to the web, and then I'll catch another question here in the room in just a minute. Ryan Nielsen with Brugler Marketing and Management regarding NASS quarterly grain stocks reports. Does there exist a possibility to segregate where off-farm stocks are by industry? For example, ethanol plants, export terminals, country elevators, feed yards, etc. Or is that level of segregation too confidential, too difficult to obtain? Dan, you want Lance?
I think the answer is yes.
Well, it depends on whether you want a yes or a no, I guess. No, it's not going to be something we're going to be able to do. You're right that if we try to break the data down that far, we're going to run into all kinds of confidentiality problems, maybe even some reporting problems. And so at least at this time, I don't see that as a possibility.
Okay, I'll move to.
Hi, good afternoon.
Don Close, American Ag Credit. My question is a follow-up to Carl's. And with the weekly export data, sales numbers on beef and the cancellations and all the noise, then we've got the export number that is a part of the comprehensive cutout report that comes out on Monday afternoon. And then we have the monthly data that comes from Commerce. None of the three align with each other. Which one am I supposed to believe? I would think that would be a combination of FAS and AMS.
Well, Census Bureau can get in here too. So Patrick, do you want to start off?
Good question. I mean, I don't monitor those other data sets, so I'm not sure I can really give you an answer. You know, we do the best we can with the data we get on the export sales reporting. Of course, that all comes to us from the industry, from the exporters. And oftentimes, as you heard Amy noted earlier, there are corrections or there are errors that the reporters then report to us, or they report it late. So, you know, then we turn that around and relay that information back in our reports. So I don't know if any of my folks that are back in Washington have any insights. I'll sort of offer the opportunity if anybody on our live, I don't know if we have anybody on our livestock team on the call actually that might be able to kind of speak to the differences in those data sets, but I don't know.
Hang on.
I'm sorry.
Amy came off mute, I think.
Go ahead. Maybe not.
Okay. Joe DeCampo, do you have anything to offer on this point?
I'm sorry, Patrick.
Yes.
It's Amy. I'm sorry. We don't have all of the codes in our data in export sales that Census does in their data. So our figures are not necessarily going to match theirs. That's part of the reason. There, for instance, there's a lot of different varieties of meat and meat products that we do not include in our export sales reporting information.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Amy.
Okay, any other input from our panelists? I'm gonna just remark, oh, Shale, sorry.
Since I'm not one of the agencies that's being asked, I'm going to go ahead and stick my foot in it anyway. Amy is quite correct. I mean, when you're looking at the AMS data, in many cases, they don't treat Canada and the EU and Mexico as exports. So you eliminate some of that. Then, as she points out, when you look at, if you're looking especially at the data presented monthly by ERS, it includes processed products. It's not just fresh, chilled, and frozen. So one of them is somewhat more of a universe than the other two are. But again, there are pros and cons. The getting the information quickly, you get it much more rapidly from the weekly reports than you do waiting 6 weeks for the monthly census data. But there's also probably more time for some of the late, how shall I say, the late reporters to get caught up. Plus, there is the annual 13th month on the census where they go and look at the past couple of years to see if there's data that they're missing as well. So it's a little bit, I don't want to say you're comparing apples and pears, but there's a little bit of that, maybe a banana thrown in as well by the time you get all three agencies done. So in terms of which one should you use, it's kind of difficult to say. I mean, obviously I tend to look at all three of them, just two of them sort of as a warning, as an early warning mechanism. And then the third one is the numbers, obviously, that we take for the purposes of putting together our forecasts.
Okay. I'm going to make a comment from the web here. Regarding the question that was asked about mycotoxins in corn, the U.S. Grains Council Corn Harvest Quality Report has some information. Then the link is provided, so maybe we can put that in the chat. So thanks to Chris Eggerman for bringing that out. I suspect USDA has some data as well, but it's good to know that that's out there. You want to go ahead? Caitlin?
Caitlin McCulloch, Livestock Marketing Information Center, sorry. This question's for NASS. Could we consider spreading out the livestock reports on the week before Christmas? Preferably off the 3 p.m. release on the 23rd. The last 2 years, it has been pretty heavy those days, and I don't think you're getting the exposure you deserve on a lot of those reports. And particularly now that you're doing stat chat and live streaming, I think it would just be better industry-wide and for you as well if you moved it off such a time-sensitive date and time relative to the holiday. Broiler hatchery looks pretty lonely on Wednesday. You could just, shift some of those reports over. And I know it's tough depending on what day Christmas falls, but.
Happy holidays. Looking at the calendar, the first thing is we're always trying to look at is data collection days that we're allowed to get the respondents. Because if you look at our response rates, we're trying to make sure response rates are adequate and coverage there. So the shorter you make that, the tougher it is for us to get quality data in for our estimates. And so that's the key factor there, is we're trying to put out the most reliable data possible. And so we push it to the end so that we can have as much time as possible for our part, and then try to give people time off for the holidays. And it just by coincidence is that way. Short years, it's even worse. Longer years, it's not as bad in the process. But when you're getting December annual hog data in with 10 days of data collection versus maybe a 14 or 15-day window, that's substantial in the process. So broilers can stay by itself on a Wednesday, I'll tell you that. So, sure. And like Caitlin emphasized, I just put a little tidbit out there. We are doing the stat chat like Dan mentioned earlier. So always encourage people to participate in that. I'm an OFER basically since I've started it. If that means basically no one's participated or asked questions if you didn't get that joke. But we are trying to be transparent and out there to answer questions that people have regarding those releases as we put them out.
So we're trying to get up Travis's, following here. Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, great question. Great point. Caitlin, do you have a particular suggestion about when you would put those reports out? You want to think about it?
I mean, Tuesday and Wednesday is almost always a better data date because it just doesn't overlap with the weekly events reports and other things. So it's up to me.
That's shortening up the data collection too much. And then the other thing you'd have to do is, the other thought is you could put it out after Christmas. But we hate to have people say that we're sitting on data. So we try to collect the data. I think that's always been a mission of NASS, is collect the data as quickly as you can, getting the highest response rate, and then putting it out to the public, putting out to the data users. So you all have as much time as you can, no matter whether it's livestock, crops, or economics. We want the data users to have those reports as quickly as possible. Sometimes it doesn't fit with the holidays. We apologize for that, but our staff are also trying to spend time with their families. So we'll work with you as much as we can. And if anyone does have suggestions, please let any of the chiefs know, and we'll discuss it.
We used to do it after Christmas. So I think if you even split them out between days, that would really put everything on that one day.
It's tough, and I agree with you, but again, we're trying to get as much data collection as possible.
the comment in the room was moving them in before Christmas was better than after Christmas, because I'm not sure that got picked up on the mics. Dale, I'm going to get to you in just a minute. I want to take a couple off the web, if that's okay. This is Mark Fay again. Thanks for answering the last question. Been using some APIs. Found that some branches really have nice APIs. For example, the FAS US export sales. Some branches or agencies don't. What is the API situation and plan for the whole USDA? That is a great question. So I'm just going to go down the murderer's row here and see if you guys have anything to add.
I don't really have much to add. I'm happy that we've been able to provide APIs for all of our databases, as noted by the person asking the question, export sales, GATS, and PSND. They've been out there for a while. If people have any input or questions about them, we usually are able to respond and provide some assistance to folks to get those up and running to use the data. So I can't really speak to what the broader plan is for USDA, but we're kind of simple in FAS. We have just the 3 and they seem to be working pretty well.
All right, real quick with the World Board, we're even more simple in ERS. We put out the WASD in 3 formats, text, PDF, and XML files. We're always open to user feedback. If there's other file formats we need to consider, or ways to think about giving the public better access to our data, we're open to that. But at least as of now, these formats seem to be working well. And again, we'll take any feedback that people are willing to provide on that.
From the perspective of NASS, we realized over the years that we need to update things. We need to update our quick stats, make it better. We know that we need to put more APIs out there, and we're in the process of doing that. It's not a quick and easy thing to do. It takes a lot of resources. And that's why with this first landing page that's coming out, we chose livestock just simply because the livestock covered so many different bases for us. Regular surveys, ag business surveys, the census of agriculture, lots of different ways that we collect the data. So it was our broadest one. We want to take that one first. And once we get that one polished, we'll be moving into economics and into crops. Two of the people that are leading the drive, Brian Combs up there and Tony Dorn, there are gentlemen that are leading this big push for all of NASS. We're hoping in the next few years we'll have it all redone, but it is a big, big task.
Yeah, I would say somewhat ditto for ERS. I'll ask Molly and Swan are on the line if you'd like to say a little bit more about what you've been doing with some of the markets and trade data.
Sure, go ahead, Swan. Thanks, Molly. So yes, for the Outlook program we are working on, we have a pilot project in the work now. And one of the things that we are exploring is providing that information via an API. And so that will be coming. You currently can't get access to, we do have API at ERS. So if you go on to Google and just type ERS space API, we do have an API page. I'll put the link into the chat for you. And so you can get our ARMS data currently through API as well right now.
For those in the room, we'll make sure and put anything that went in the chat, on the page when we get done too in the next day or so. Mike?
I think from the Farm Service Agency perspective, it's one of the things, I talked earlier about modernization. It's one of the things we've discussed. And I would love more feedback because I think in some ways we trend the other way. I feel like our agency is more of an after the fact data rather than an informative data like many of the others here. So I would love your feedback if that's more beneficial or more the dashboard, export the answer rather than export all the great data that feeds the answers like these other agencies go for.
And I don't know, AMS, if you want to offer any comment. There you are.
Yes. Hi, thank you. So I actually don't have a comment as far as the overarching USDA plan, but I know at AMS, we are working to add more of our price series into the API. It's a long-term project and each commodity division is kind of being handled handled, excuse me, separately, but we are making steady progress. So a good portion of the dairy price series are already in the API, but we are adding to it as best as we can. But I think that Kim Mercer from Specialty Crops is also on the call, and she may want to address the specialty crops portion.
Yes, thank you, Janet. By the end of this year, we hope to have all of our legacy data for specialty crops, as well as I think livestock will be online with API for their data. That includes everything that was already in the Oracle system, so searchable. And then moving on, further data will be joining in future years as further enhancements as we move forward. But by the end of this calendar year, we should have most of our current data be available via API.
I think going right at the heart of the question about, whether there's a USDA and exactly a USDA strategy for APIs, that the data are so federated that I'm not sure that you can have simply one, universal API to get it, all the data from AMS through FAS, NASS, et cetera. But I think that, we're all working on trying to make our data more accessible and, such that those APIs are very clear about how you get data and how you can pull things directly. Dale, I'm going to give you the floor now. Sorry, have you been on hold for a bit?
No, that's fine. Dale Dirkholz again. And I got a question for Patrick, and I'm not picking on you, Patrick. But before I get
usually
to
proceeds, I'm picking on you, Patrick.
but before I get to that, I got a suggestion for Mike. The acreage data you put out monthly starting in August, why don't you move it out of the electronic reading room and get it out to a more visible spot so people can get to it a whole lot easier? I still have people asking me, where did you find that? Just make it more visible. That's just a suggestion.
Couldn't agree more, and it's one of our top objects to do of modernize that. A little history on that: the person that had been doing that has retired, so it's actually now our opportunity as we're transitioning that to somebody else to truly modernize the process. So fully agree with you.
Good to know. Patrick, got a question about the export sales report, and maybe I assume Amy deals with export sales, and maybe she'd be the one to answer it. For the last couple of years, especially as we go through the fall and on into the early part of winter, maybe even on into January, February, we always seem to be having huge revisions to weekly export sales of soybeans, and we don't see that big significant change in export sales like for wheat and corn. My question is, why do we seem to be having them for soybeans and not the other two? And I understand why you have revisions. I'm not arguing about that. But beans seem to be unusually large relative to the other products I look at.
Yes, thanks for the question. Amy, do you have any insights on why big revisions for soybeans versus the other crops?
Other than the fact that contracts or sales, export sales are made with future delivery periods most of the time, and it may just be that there was not the need for those further out shipments to happen, so they get canceled. Other than that, I don't really have any insight on why that happens.
But the revisions that I normally see that are made into the prior week numbers always seem to be huge upward revisions. They are not cancellations at all. So, I'm always puzzled as to why we're seeing a big revision in soybeans, but yet I don't see it for corn. I don't see it on wheat on prior weekly sales totals.
Can you give me an example perhaps of what you're looking at, what you're seeing?
Well, actually, I'm just looking at the aggregate, the cumulative sales for the marketing year in soybeans, for example. And when I look at that cumulative sales, and you also provide the weekly sales for beans, but yet if I go back, and right now we're into the spring, so they aren't so big at this point around, but when we're in the fall period and on into the early winter period, let's say from like October all the way out into about January sometime, those revisions for the prior week are always huge for beans. And I'm talking sometimes 5-6 million bushel, maybe even a little bit more at times, you know, and it's always the prior week number that seems to get revised.
I don't have an answer for that, but that certainly is something that we can look into and perhaps provide an answer when we send out the questions and answers from this session.
No, that's fine. I mean, I was just curious as to why it's germane to soybeans and not wheat or corn. You're certainly welcome to get a hold of me and I can show you some specific detail on some of that. But like I say, it happens into this heavy sales, heavy shipment period that we have in the fall winter period now. But again, doesn't show up for any of the other two, even though, yeah, they're revisions, but they seem to be modest and mild, but beans sometimes are just huge. And it's been the last couple of years really that it's occurred.
Okay, we'll take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Dale. I mean, and if you want to send us some, you know, a couple of snapshot examples of what you're talking about, you know, we can definitely take a look at it and see if there's anything we can offer.
Okay, while the mic's making a move, I'll toss in one from the web here. I'm guessing maybe Mark and perhaps NASS. Will crop yield reports going forward, at least for 2022 and 2023, take into account shortage of fertilizer supplies domestically and globally? This is Jim Long, by the way. Thanks for the question.
Let's see. Well, let's see. You know, our yield modeling processes aren't changing year to year. Mike, let me see if do you have anything you want to add on this one?
Short answer on that one would be stay tuned for the May WASI.
All right.
And Lance, do you want to make any comment about what we'll observe for NASS?
Well, I would just say that if you look at the yields that we'll forecast at NASS, we'll base it on a combination of survey work that we do where we'll either be asking producers to tell us what you expect your yields to be. Obviously, if they have issues with fertilizer availability, they would be factoring that into the reporting. The objective yield work that we do as we go into those sample fields, take counts, measurements, send samples to the lab, that would account for any issues such as this. And so it would be reflected in the results. And then last but not least, any satellite analysis that we do would also have the opportunity to reflect that, although it wouldn't single out that as a particular issue. But so once we get into the game in August for the corn and soybeans, there would be an opportunity for us to capture any impact that may or may not have.
Okay. I'm going to, if there's no other additions to that, I'm going to take one more question from the web and then I'm going up here because this is a little bit different question to Dr. McGuire at ERS. We are conducting a farmer study on land tenure / heirs property. Is there a subject matter expert who can speak to us about our survey instrument?
Yes, there is. You know, why don't I just follow up with you with a couple different emails afterwards? I'll get your name from Joe. Yep, I can put you to the right person.
Yeah, and you already clicked off of it. So I was going to offer the name, but yes, we'll make sure that you get that. And yeah, there's a team at USDA working on heirs property. So that, okay.
Thanks.
I'll go up here.
River Marketing Management. They kind of hit part of my question there a minute ago with the fertilizer impact on yields, and Lance gave us the answer I thought Lance would give us, which is the farmer will tell us what the yield is. But I am very interested in because this is a known issue, how is WAOB going to handle it for May, June, and July when they're doing the numbers without the farmer input? And and part two of that is, what are we doing to raise the visibility of fertilizer supplies or measure them, or the impact of fertilizer inputs? I know USDA has some data on this, but this is a big issue right now in a controversy that is to, is it going to hurt the yields or not?
Okay. So Marco.
Yeah, no,
you do the
no,
first part?
I'd just go back again and say that, you know, our guys are, I mean, they're looking at all the information they have. They're looking at fertilizer markets from, you know, every source, public and private, they can find. In terms of the actual specifics, Mike, anything else you want to add on your thoughts? In terms of the yield modeling process, or?
I mean, I appreciate the question. Obviously, it's a very delicate subject, and there's a wide variance in opinions on the impacts, and we're obviously evaluating all available sources. And as I said with the last question, stay tuned for the May WASD. So.
Yeah. Main thing is just know they're considering it. I mean, obviously, it's a big issue.
So Patrick, would we have any data? You'd mentioned some things, I think, in your remarks about situation and other drivers. Would you have any data on fertilizer imports or exports?
I mean, we're not really fertilizer experts. Obviously, it's a big issue, and we're also looking at the situation. But you know, our folks are participating in the same interagency commodity estimates process as the World Board. So it's a committee work. You know, our analysts are working with Mike and others. So I don't really have anything more to add with respect to kind of the WASD estimates and the fertilizer impacts there.
And Kelly, I don't know if you might have anything to add, just thinking about, you know, when folks typically buy fertilizer, when they fall application from ARMS 2, anything there that you can think of that you would bring to bear on this question?
If any of the ERS folks have any information, chime in. I know that the person who does the farm income is not on the call here, so I don't have her expertise to add in terms of fertilizer prices and what's been going on. The February farm income report that we put out took into account the changes in fertilizer prices, but she's not on the phone. Anybody from ERS have anything to add on the fertilizer side?
Kelly, this is Mike McConnell. And I guess I'll sound like a broken record. And obviously there's in the agency process, we're evaluating it and using all the information that we have, including looking at some of that information that comes from the cost production side, that team at ERS as well. So that's just, one of the additional data sources that we're evaluating as we take account all the data and for all the different components of the different commodity markets.
Alan, do you have any follow-up? You good? Okay. I might need a clarification. This is from Al Anderson Lazo. We're interested in confirming our understanding of the history of relevant data collection. But I don't know if Al, if you want to maybe say a little bit more, or perhaps or respond and add a little more to your question, we'll try to address it. I'm not quite tracking. I'm going to go on to a question from Joe Kleinman. Can World Ag Outlook Board provide detailed descriptions of the data used to calculate final exports for each commodity in the WASD? That is specific HS codes from census, or if FAS export sales shipments, etc. Can FAS provide specific source for foreign countries' trade numbers in the PSD data set?
Not off the top of my head.
Right.
Yeah, I think if we can get the details on the question, we can probably provide a little bit more response in writing later. But there's kind of a lot there to. I'm not sure that even turning it over to all of the individual analysts would be productive right now.
So Joe, at least from World Ag Outlook Board, make sure and check back when we post the written answers, which we hope to have in a couple of days on our website. That's a note to everybody. We'll be hopefully some of these questions that have a fair bit of detail in them, we'll try to be a little more clear out on that page. Patrick?
Yeah, I think I like Mark's response to that. It's a fairly detailed question. I know that we know specifically what are the codes that are covered in the export sales report. I don't know them off the top of my head, obviously. You know, our export numbers that we have in PS&D are the same as in WASB. So, and we know the specific commodities that are covered if you look at soybeans or soybean meal or whatever, but I can't give you all those here now. So I think it's too detailed a question. We probably need to provide a response in writing.
It sounds like perhaps under the hood, Joe might be asking, could there be a document such that, you know, would describe this, you know, that someone could find some documentation perhaps. Anyway, I have that it is 2:55 and we promised that we would have a 20-minute break at 2:55, but I want to make sure and tell both my in-person audience and my virtual audience, you know, unlike late night TV, you know, don't shut off the TV and leave, you know, make sure and come back because we have plenty more time and a lot more questions that we'd like to get at. So we will see everybody at 3:15, right, Marissa? 3:15, we'll be back on and live. Thanks. Oh, and there should be, for those in the room, there should be some treats in the hallway, I think. Marissa, I may need a little help for just a minute. My computer decided it needed a reboot, so while I'm getting back to where I can see questions. Well, first I'll see if there's a question in the room. If somebody can. Sorry.
Is this working? Oh.
Oh, okay, great.
I
Yeah,
had a question, but it's for Janet at AMS. I don't know if she's still.
I think she's out there. I'm
She's
not
in the
connected,
ether?
but she is.
Oh. Yep.
Hi. My question is about, Eric Moore, Grow Intelligence. My question is about the AMS API. Is the plan, I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but is the plan to eventually move all the legacy historical data that some of which is now not found on the API to the API? And it seems like there's sort of a gradual process of moving some of these reports to the Market News API. And I'm wondering if there is a schedule or if it's not quite so sophisticated as to when everything will be eventually available on the API.
That is a great question, and thanks for being interested in the API. We're pretty happy with it as a new development. Well, for dairy specifically, I believe we do plan to move a good portion of historical data to the API, but not necessarily things from 50 years ago. So maybe things in a more recent history. And I think the same is probably true for some of the other market news organizations. But again, you know, Kim could certainly speak to the specialty crops part of it. I think the plan is to certainly get as much onto the API as possible. It is not as formal a thing as a schedule. Some of it has to do with, you know, the funding as it takes money to do these enhancements. And as the funding is available, we're making plans to move things over as best we can. And our first goal was to obviously get all of the market news divisions present in the My Market News data site. So that's the first thing. And then, you know, coming after that will be the enhancements of trying to update the things that are available via the API. And I don't know if Kim has something else she wants to add to that.
Right. Thanks, Janet. Yes, I was going to chime in a little bit. I believe specialty crops and livestock have coordinated a little bit on that. Where our current data is complete, we have set a time, I believe it's 2 years for correctable data, and I think up to 5 years for complete data to transfer over into the API. And it could be as much as 10 years, depending on resources, but we have decided to be consistent on that. So it will be a good chunk of data there, and we've decided to be consistent there together where the data sets are complete. And again, that's just for legacy data.
Thanks. Okay. Is there another question in the room? I'll get back to the web in a minute. I can't see my questions yet, but I think I'll be back in the chips in a minute. So there's Jerry.
A little out of my general bailiwick, but the question kind of come up today as to how the USDA is really approaching this beyond beef, beyond meat type situation. Is there scanner data to try to give us a feel as how that's doing? Is there a area in the meat area that's been dedicated, I should say, to that situation, and that type of thing? But it's an area that we've had ups and downs of different products coming into the meat world over the years, and that. But this is the most current one because it really does also impact what's going on in the industrial side of pork proteins, things of that nature, and some update in that world that's visible would be, I think, helpful for both the grain side people and maybe what's going on in the beef and meat side of the industry. What kind of ideas and things are there? It's probably some obvious things that I'm not aware of.
Okay, I'll jump in here, Joe. It's still.
Yes.
Okay,
please.
okay.
Yes, that's where I was going anyway.
Yeah, okay. Just want.
You got it.
So yes, you're correct. There are scanner data. We haven't done anything that I'm aware of, but I'll double check when I'm done talking here with the folks on the line with the Beyond Meat or alternative meats, but we have with the alternative dairy sources, so nut milks and things like that. And so we do have a report. I'll make sure that it gets into the Q&A. I don't know the title off the top of my head, where we looked at consumption of the alternative milk sources. And I'm pretty sure we have a chart of note recently. I might be able to sneak a look at my phone and see if I can find that quickly. But ERS folks on the line, do you have anything going on in the market space on the alternative meats?
Yes, we do have a cooperative agreement to look at consumer preferences and plant-based meats or other, what are they called? Mere meat. They're genetically use the now I'm forgetting the term, the DNA of the meat to fabricate in the laboratory. Someone help me out with. But in any case, we have about 5 cooperative agreements, one specifically looking at this consumer preferences. So.
Where would that be located at, or where can I look for it?
They're not out yet, so I would expect at least a year or two before publications are released. This is a cooperative agreement that we just started. So
Yeah, hopefully that they're still in the meat case time you get down.
Okay. Another question in the room?
Information Center. And I think we've kind of hinted around some of this, but as USDA wide, I'm always impressed by how many different products you guys are putting out across agencies. And one of the key things Jim Robb used to really bring up a lot was how we needed to credit USDA for USDA data. How should we as a group be thinking of your agencies either separately in terms of data products? Should we be trying to highlight those specific products or your specific agencies when we talk about them? Like how as a group should we be trying to help you guys promote your various applications and resources?
Mark, you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. Appreciate that Caitlin. I think a couple things I would note is, it's always good to be cited. I mean, cite the data when you use it. In the World Board, I mean, we, unlike a lot of the other agencies here on the panel, I mean, we're also a data user. So we recognize the importance of NASS data and FAS data, and it's all part of what we use to produce the WASD. But I think it's just important to us. It's gratifying to us to see when our reports are cited, our data is cited, and cite it as the source. Coming from the World Board, coming from WASD, coming from ERS or NASS. I think it helps us. It helps us with our stakeholders to be recognized in that respect. And not sure what else I would add.
Yeah, I would just add as a minimum, if it says USDA, that's great. And then agency specific after that. But we see a lot of our charts and stuff that are taken and the USDA is scrubbed off.
I think an important, just to add on to what Dan said, I think especially for a data collection agency like NASS, it's especially important that we can close the loop with the farmers and ranchers for which we're asking, their privileged information, their personal information, and asking for their time and energy. If we can't draw the connection whenever they see that data in their favorite farm publication or from their advisor or whatever else, that where that source data came from, because I think that helps, sort of drive the message that there's value in what they're seeing, even if they're not necessarily going to the NASS website or NASS API. They're obviously folks are going to get their data from, from many, many sources, and often after some analysis and such has been applied.
Yeah, I was going to say something along those lines too. We're constantly asked, or want information on how are the data used. So, you're asking us to provide all this data. How are the data used? So the more we know about how the data are used by different stakeholders, it helps us to, when we're asking folks to provide this information. And I would also say we've actually done kind of this little side project trying to get a better sense of folks who are using the ARMS data. And it's so challenging when it's either not cited or, it's cited in some, sort of obscure way to find out, if you're going through literature or doing web scrapes and things like that to figure out, who's actually using the data, because then that helps us better understand, what other questions need to be asked on the survey, where are there gaps in what people, the understanding is and what they need. And so having at least that USDA citation is great. We usually provide on all of our data products a suggested citation, because people are often not sure how to, actually cite the information. So we try to provide a suggested citation for folks to use. So.
Hey, Joe, I want to make one comment too.
Yep.
I would actually, maybe this is just my opinion, but I'd suggest citing down to the agency can be useful too, because sometimes that speaks to where the data came from and things of that nature. I know, of course, crops is very specific, but I talk to folks a lot about making sure they understand the difference between the World Board and NASS, because you need to understand that yield you see in May comes from a completely different place than the yield that NASS will forecast in August. And so I think there can be value in citing it down more specific than just USDA.
Okay, great. Next question from the web. Thanks, Marissa. Andrew Chorney, I hope I didn't butcher your name too badly. And this, I think, is for the AMS team. Can you please make morning pork and morning beef reports available via Data Mart or Mars or API? Right now, they're only available on PDF as of 2 years ago. Thanks.
And that question too, I think we would refer to our people in livestock, poultry, grain, so that we can get an answer back on that.
Okay, so I would say look for the written transcript, and you should have a specific answer to that, Andrew. And then I'll move on also on the web from Bennett Meyer. Apologies if this was already discussed in the initial comments, but does WAOB have plans to extend their history of the WASD historical database back before 2010? And Mark, I think you said you've talked about this before, but remember.
Yeah, so currently I think we have the historical data going back 10 years. We've continued to try to clean up the older data. You know, it gets more complicated the further back you go, just because the WASD has changed over time. The tables have changed. The variables that are in the tables have changed. So we've been cleaning that up, and we do plan to post the entire data set going all the way back to 1973. At some point, we're just not quite there yet. It's a massive undertaking, of cleaning that data. And you know, for now, we're glad to at least have it back to 2010. But yeah, we are working on going back further.
So I think Jerry Cessna, for those of you following along, or that at least that are on the web, he did post the link to that Amber Waves article that that you mentioned. So it's out there in the chat. I'm going to go on to, it's a good question. Travis, are you ready? Austin Schroeder, it seems like NASS is revising hogs and pigs data more times than not, and sometimes by a huge margin. Are you doing anything to improve data collection as to not have so many large revisions? Dan, do you want to say anything before it goes to Travis? Travis has got it. Okay, Travis.
Thank you for the question. As everyone's aware, the last 2 years has been a struggle during the pandemic. And so trying to get the data reflective of what's actually going on out there has required some revisions, but on sheer magnitude, years ago, back during the 2014 timeframe, I think it was 14, 15, there was some large revisions then when the outbreaks back then and the impact it had. And every quarter except December goes back to the previous 4 quarters for revisions. And so when you're trying to get some of those relationship factors, because everything is biological and some of those biological impacts have to be worked out. And that means going back maybe a quarter, 2, 3 quarters. And then when you get to December, we allow more quarters to be open. And throughout this pandemic, with some of the challenges that have been experienced because of slaughter implications, labor, a bunch of different factors that have been impacting the industry. And as you can see, the litter rate pre-COVID, that was a linear kind of impact that the sows were progressing more live pigs per litter. And then when the pandemic hit, that's been some quarters, some year comparisons have been minimal changes or down. And so the struggles there too, and labor has been a challenge for the hog producers in the US, which causes some of these impacts that we're seeing when we're getting the data from quarter to quarter. And so that's why we're trying to make sure the data is most reflective out there for the industry, so that the decisions and impacts there are what's reality on the farms. Though I mean, I know we're USDA and some people say whatever they say about the data, but it relies on our producers providing us the data so we can get the reliable data out there that can be usable for the industry itself.
And overall, we get good cooperation, especially from large hog operations in the United States. We document what our procedures are in a methodology and quality measures report, which is on the NASS website, including coefficients of variation to describe that the level of uncertainty in the data. So that's a good place to go if you want to learn a little bit more in some details as well. I have a question.
Joe? Yeah. Why don't you just expand on that a little bit? I mean, really those quality measure reports, we're putting out more and more of those. Actually, your division is working on those with SD, and we're putting out more and more quality measure reports so you can see how good the data is. And you can see a measure of that data, not just us verbally telling you, you can see the CVs we published the sample size and some variation. I don't know if you want to say more about
So
that.
I guess a couple of three things in that regard, as we describe the some qualitative aspects or quantitative aspects of their data, no data are perfect. But I would point at, if you look at our track records, for example, those are some interesting data to look at about how much, to what extent we've had to change between first and final. We have had some recent revisions in hogs, for example. But if you look over a longer span of time, it gives you a good sense of the revisions that we've had to make. So that's one aspect of looking at quality. And then I think, Dan is talking about our methodology and quality measures. So in that, we actually have a couple of pieces. One, we describe our survey programs and the survey instruments, of which there are many. And then we also, for many programs, we'd like to make it all programs, describe in the quality measures really some fairly detailed information about what the data collection looked like, what our procedures were, how we adjusted for non-response, how we dealt with certain weighting issues, how we went about editing the data and so on and so forth. And then finally, we include for a few statistics. One, some details on sample size, both at the national or regional level and also the state level. And then some CVs or coefficients of variation that describe the statistical uncertainty that we have from having a sample and having non-response. And then we also do some weighted measures of coverage. And what I mean by that is, for example, what proportion of the number of hogs in the United States did we actually have to estimate versus collect data directly on for a weighted measure of response. And so we have a number of items out there that I think if you want to dig a little bit further, you can know a little bit more. And we're always happy to talk with folks as well about our procedures. So we've expanded that by quite a bit. We still have some to go. We've got one out there for grain stocks. I think we talked about that in a breakout session a time or so ago. We've got one out there for hemp, by the way, which if you think that hemp is an easy item to estimate, I've got news for you. It's got some twists and turns in it. It's quite interesting.
And then you mentioned track reports too. I mean, we're tracking, I think, what is it, Lance, Travis, 20 years worth of data on those longer. And that's out there. You can look at those if you're one that bases your whole assumption on magnitude of revisions, they're out there for all the crops and the livestock, the major items. We're not hiding anything. Take a look at it, and we're always open to suggestions.
It's a great question though, and it is it's a challenging business to estimate what's going on with phenomena like that, especially when there's a discontinuity like a pandemic. But we'll do what we can. I'm going to go on to one more question on the web, and then I'll come back to the room. So if you've got something you're thinking about here. Ryan Nielsen with Burglar Marketing and Management. By the way, this is about differences between attaché reports and WASD, I think. FAS gain and attaché reports, I should have said. I noticed on a recent Brazilian corn outlook, mainly forecasting preliminary 22-23 S&Ds, the report was made public on the 12th. Within the report, the attaché had USDA's official old crop figure at 114 million metric tons, despite the WASI showing 116 in the April release on the 8th. Therefore, the question is, why was the attaché report not using the most current forecast information? Scroll down. Furthermore, on April 13th for Brazilian soybeans, the attaché report was showing Feb estimates, which was a worse 2 months, two months dated.
Okay, long question, but I think a short answer. It's mostly a timing issue. We do ask our post to correct and use the official WASDE numbers as the old estimate or the official estimate. But oftentimes these reports are written prior to the WASDE. In this case, they were both the oilseeds and the grains report. So the reports come in, they don't get published immediately. There's a waiting period for our folks to have a chance to review them in-house. And in this case, these were written, they were in the system but not published. WASDE came out, would change the numbers, and therefore the reports did match. I think the oilseeds one may be sent back for revision. I hear from my folks, not sure about the grain, but that's the reason.
Okay, and Mark, I don't know, on the other side of the coin, do you have anything you want to say about attaché reports versus what you might show for a country?
Not much more to add. I mean, other than that, the WASDE reports are the official USDA supply and use estimates for all these commodities. Sometimes attaché reports can differ, I think, but based on timing and whatnot. But the WASDE is the official USDA record.
Okay,
Mark, if I could I jump in real quick? Because I think this one comes up. It came up previously with China corn imports, and I just want to reiterate for the record that the attaché reports are one of many inputs that we look at across the commodities at any given month for the WASDE. It's not the only input that we look at. So.
Okay. This one I think is for you, Kelly. And I think it's referring to an earlier question when you were talking about ARMS data and APIs, I believe. This is from Bruno Arthur. Perhaps a dedicated web page for detailed ARMS data, 1, description / data dictionary, and 2, access direction would be a good starting point.
Yes, we can put that link in the response. We do have a page on how to access the data, API, other information on it. And does NASS have something?
Tony?
No. Okay. So yeah, I'll put the link directly in the Q&A response on this where you can get the data or how to access the data.
I got a hand up over there. You want to get a microphone? Oh, Dale, do you still have a question? I'll let you
Yeah,
go.
I got a new one.
Got a new one.
Dale
All right.
Nichols here, and I think this is for Kelly because I think you're the one that mentioned it in the beginning of the session. You talked about doing some climate change research. What kind of research are you doing and where is it published? That's what I'm curious about. And how long term of research are you really looking at? Are you looking at something that's, next 10 years, you're looking 20, 30 years out? What kind of things are occurring in that particular field?
Well, that's a big question.
Just an overview. That's really what I'm looking for and what kind of things you're doing.
Yeah, let me think if I come up with kind of a couple of highlights there. So we have a couple of models that we have in-house that we run in-house that are great for looking at climate impacts, usually going out no more than about 50 years. And so these are things, call them in economics terms, computable general equilibrium models. They're big models of the economy. You tweak one part of it and let's see how prices and quantities change throughout the world, really. We also have a model that we use that's just domestic, looks domestically. It's called REAP. It's the Regional Environmental and Agricultural Programming Model. It's kind of a mouthful there, but that looks at how resources change within the US, within the continental US, and then what that means for agriculture. So those are two of our models that the CGE model allows us to look a little more long-term. The domestic model is, we're looking just short-term, few years. So we've kind of started really thinking about those models and how we can use those to address climate questions and issues. The parallel though is you also need the data in order to do that as well. And so it's kind of a dual exercise. It's not just a modeling exercise, it's having the data too. So, there's a whole host of different questions that one can look at, in that space. It takes a little while. So I would say in the next year or so, start looking and we'll have reports out that'll allow show what we're doing in there. The other thing I'll just mention that's useful in this space is a survey that we did a couple of years ago with NASS called the Survey of Irrigation Organizations. And so this was the first time that a survey like this had been done in about 50 years. There used to be a census of irrigation organizations that was last done, I think, in 1978. And then there was kind of a drought of information. So that was an on-the-fly joke. I've not used that one before, but at any rate, so with NASS, we really started looking at this part of the industry, who's supplying water, where are they getting it, and where is it going? And so there are a lot of data that are now available on what's going on. And we had a sample of about 5,000 organizations that we talked to. ERS has been putting out some data in that space, and we've got about 6 reports. 3 of them are out, really drilling down in terms of what are the technologies that they're using to deliver water, where's that water going, where's it coming from? And so that is really helping to think about the drought aspect of climate change and what that means for drought resiliency, and resiliency of the agricultural sector is kind of knowing what's going on in the water space. So kind of a few highlights there.
So just around climate and climate adaptation, the Office of the Chief Economist, Bill Hohenstein, is his team manages a lot of the things, and there's a lot of information there. So on the OCE website, and then the Office of the Chief Scientist, and Brian, maybe you can help me. I'm not sure who the point of contact there is, but I know there's both coordination between OCE and then the Office of the Chief Scientist. And so you can find a lot of resources there. And there's also quite a discussion about the data needs in order to be able to measure some of these things and understand where we're at, and other things in order to be able to do measurement. I got a question up here, and then I'll come back to you.
Just quick. The attaché reports, are they written by State Department employees or USDA employees?
So I'm going to repeat the question if you don't mind. Attaché reports, are they generated by State Department employees or USDA employees?
Those are USDA FAS employees. Our agricultural attachés serve in the embassies. We have a lot of locally employed staff who work for our agency. I guess technically they fall under the State Department, in behind the scenes the way it's worked out, but they are FAS employees who we pay. And they work together with our attachés and the embassies to compile the information and send in to us.
Okay, you've got the microphone, the talking stick, as it were.
Karen Braun from Reuters, and my
Hi,
question is for Patrick. First of all, we're talking about the GAIN reports, and I love those. Those are so informative and so useful to learn about just international markets, and for anybody that wants to learn about any country and their trade and their production and anything like that is just so helpful, and I've always found that. So keep up that good work. But with Ukraine, I'm just curious, do you still have people there on the ground? Are your people in Ukraine? How has the information that you're getting changed? Like, you're going to be estimating the corn crop here in a couple of weeks. Like, is the information that is going into that this year similar to past years? And then the second part of that question would be about Russia, how I know that our presence was reduced there last year. And I'm wondering how that information has changed and if that's impacted your Russian forecasts at all.
Very good question. I will start. I'll probably ask my colleague to my left to also chime in. So it's obviously very fluid situation in Ukraine. And there was a lot of sensitivity around what is available, what's not available. I mentioned in my opening remarks that we are using all of the information that we have at our disposal. We have some in-country contacts, can't really say more about that, but we're not flying blind. We have our geospatial tools. We have satellite imagery, high resolution imagery. There's typical geospatial analysis that we do. So there's a lot of information that we have at our disposal. We have not had an official attaché report from Ukraine since February, I believe, was the last one. But we're using all the other information that we have to do the best we can. And the results of that will be, seen in the May WASDE when we come out with our forecast. Russia, it's an ongoing situation. We talked about it last time we had this meeting. We don't have a presence there anymore. We understand it's a huge void. It's an important player in the global grain market. And we're looking at, options to be able to collect, continue to have information available for Russia, things we're working on. And I think it's yet to be seen, but if we are able to get some information, we'll look at how we can provide that to the external community. It probably won't be traditional game reports, but if we're able to collect information that we find is useful, we can publish it in our commodity circulars or in our agricultural trade reports that I mentioned earlier. So I'll turn it over to Mark if he wants to add.
Yeah, and I don't think there's much I can add. We're relying on all the information that FAS is bringing to the table. And Patrick noted there is still a lot of information out there. So I guess just to echo Mike Jewison, stay tuned for the May WASDE.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move to a question off the web. Chris Eggerman of the Andersons, question for NASS. For winter wheat acreage estimates released in January, March, and June, is RMA insured acreage used at all as an indicator? Is FSA certified acreage used before the small grain summary in September? Go to Lance here. Okay.
First, from the RMA side, no, there wouldn't be anything readily available to us for that data that early in the process. We will have it available in time for the small grain summary in September. The FSA certified acres is certainly available by June for winter wheat, and there's data available there in March as well, although it's not as useful at that point because it's still being cleaned and processed, as my friend at FSA can tell you. But in some places, it can be more complete. And so we get some value out of it in March, nothing in December typically, just far too incomplete at that point. But by the June acreage report, it's pretty good for winter wheat.
And some of the cover crop kind of gets in the mix with as it were, with winter wheat FSA data, right? Do you want to say anything?
Oh, you want to go there? Okay.
Sure.
So, yeah, you might want to leave. So a few years ago, FSA changed the way they record cover crop in the certification process. And so cover crops have their own categories. There's either 3 or 4, I forget, different categories, 3 that it can fall in. And so as an example, in years past, winter wheat that was planted as a cover crop would have been recorded as winter wheat with an intended use code as for a cover crop. And so that was great for NASS. But now it's reported as a cover crop, and there's no indication as to whether it's winter wheat or rye or, take your pick. And so any of that acreage that's planted as a cover crop, it's pretty difficult for us to, well, it's impossible for us to determine what that crop is. And so there's going to be a little bit more gray area around some of those crops like winter wheat that can be used as a cover crop when it comes to interpreting the certified acreage data from FSA.
Okay, great, thanks. I want to remind folks that we do have EIA with us today. So Darren is here, and so if you he didn't want the barrel, but I don't know if y'all have anything that around EIA's data products. I know they're of interest to several of you. Want to make sure you are aware of it. I think Jerry's got a question, so maybe I got you in trouble, Darren.
Yes,
EIA issues that's come up in some of my analysis of things along the way. I guess it's just surprising that it takes so long to get a final number. The April, early April or late March 31st data. We finally got the final overall data for January. And then we still didn't get the final because we haven't got the degenerate or nature, excuse me. It could be degenerate. It's gasoline in there to get a final look at how much ethanol production we really have in this country on a monthly basis. Right now, we haven't got January settled yet because it doesn't come out until the 22nd to the 29th. Last month, it didn't come out until the final report. From there, the 1003 number that's in the EIA numbers is where you get that. So it's interesting in the fact that, you know, the weeklies give us some sense of that, but there's been huge adjustments on stocks on a monthly basis that's come through. I know that's an issue with all stocks. You have issues back and forth, but it seems like to me that the ethanol producers would have a better handle on their stocks and also to some extent the number of bushels that they, because the bushels actually come from the USDA. That's a good factor that it's coming. It's actually a month ahead of the EIA data. So there's a complicated world out there. I'd love to be able to get EIA a little closer to the goal line, similar to what we see in the stuff from USDA. So we could have a complete set of data. So right now, we still don't have things completed. And here is the middle of April. We haven't got January's data completed. I'm sorry to say. That's my analysis of it. I hope that there's some enthusiasm in EIA to go ahead and get maybe faster cumulative information.
Yeah, so I know speeding up a lot of our data products is of interest to a lot of people. And currently that functionality that would be required to put out things more quickly isn't currently in our systems. Like a few of the other organizations were mentioning, they're going through modernization efforts and kind of de-siloing some of these products. And with that, we haven't been able to speed up any of the reporting practices, and it's kind of lower on the priority list as we're kind of in a backlog of development. So it is a wish for a lot of us at the organization to get things out as timely as possible. And we're looking into any of those potential avenues to do that. It's just kind of on the backlog for now.
Oh, okay. I'm going to kind of go back to a question out on the web here. This is again Ryan Nielsen following up Patrick. Thank you for taking my question, but just to clarify, for that Brazilian oilseeds outlook attaché report, which was published in April, but showing WASDE official data for January and February, that was due to a review delayed timing issue? Question. If so, should that review period include incorporating the most recent WASDE data? Likewise, if the report was sent back to Brazil, would FAS mention that in the report going forward? Basically, what I'm getting at is if the data in the summary tables is dated by 3 to 4 months, should we fear the full report is also not up to date?
Yeah, I don't, well, first, we are sending that report back to be revised, corrected, and resubmitted. I can assure you that, you know, our reports aren't dated 3 to 4 months. I mean, I think this is a kind of a unique situation with the timing. And, you know, our attachés and our LES working overseas are, you know, pretty diligent and committed to what they're doing. So I don't think we have normal situation where people should be concerned that our reports are, or the information in our reports are dated.
Okay, thanks. I'm open to take a question in the room. Anybody have more questions? There we go. Somebody get that man a microphone.
There you go. Okay. One more time. Tanner and so on specialty crops, this gets a little bit difficult with all the data out there. There's so many different crops, but one of the crops that we've been following is rice, and one of the changes that's going on there. Wondering if you guys have or can collect data on rice acreage, specifically the way it's breaking out between long grain and the fragrant varieties, jasmine, basmati, because we're seeing some big changes going on in the industry, but there's just not the data there on the acreage really to track that or to reveal if there is a change going on at the farm level. And if so, how big is it? Is that something you guys track? I know that there's just in the past year and a half, FAS has done a great job of collecting the export and import data for the first time. Can we start collecting data on acreage?
So always do rice this year.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's, let's see. So rice was the commodity that we surveyed in the ARMS survey this past year. Let me ask you, Nathan Childs, do you happen to be on from ERS? No, he's not on. He would know the answer to your question right away. So I'm looking, Lance, do you have any idea when those data would be available? And I don't know the specifics though as to whether the questions asked about the different varieties, but at least would give you some information on acreage. Tony?
Right. Yeah, rice was a commodity for the ARMS 2 data. We published that as far as the chemical use acres applied and that and overall acreages. We don't, as far as I remember, have any breakout information on, the different jasmine or basmatic or anything like that. So that is coming out. Our normal highlights will come out, I think, in a few months. I don't have the exact date right offhand. May 13th. Thank you, Dan.
Just one thing I would say is that you can find our ARMS questionnaires online, and we could, I'm not familiar enough off the top of my head whether or not we would have asked about fragrant varieties in the deep dive into ARMS or not. Great question, though.
Joe, that's something we can check on it. We can
Yep.
respond in the queue.
Absolutely, we will respond. Oh, Mike Jewison has his hand up. So, Mike?
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Accidentally.
I was going to say, like, you're moving into rice. Okay. Look out, Mark. All right. Okay, there's a question. A couple of them.
David Widmar, Ag Economic Insights. ERS had a report on fertilizer use and prices that went back decades. And then the last decade, it's been pretty sparsely updated. Given the concerns around fertilizer usage, products being used, price points, is there any momentum or ability to update that report, or can we see any life going back into that report possibly?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can look into that. I don't know specifically whether that particular report is one that's, or something similar, but I certainly can look into that. Yeah.
There you go.
Emily Balsamo from CME Group. This is for the EIA. And forgive me if I am mistaken in thinking that there isn't regular data published on this, but are there any plans for data on renewable diesel?
In what data series are you looking for? Production data or exports or?
Yeah, production, pricing, exports.
Yeah, so that recently got included in our supply and disposition tables that you can find in our Petroleum Supply Monthly with the January 2022 data release, which just came out a few weeks ago. And there's a whole write-up on that page as well with all of our notes of our changes that in which tables those breakouts were included.
Thank you.
So for the folks that are on the web, Jody McDaniel posted think it was Jody, a link to the guides to surveys that has the ARMS forms on it. So you can take a look there for the question about rice. Other questions? We're close to the end. I mean, surely we can fill up 5 or 10 more minutes, right? Okay. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Once you we'll get your mic down here so the folks on the web will be able to hear you. I think there's always a little bit of a delay before it comes to life.
Just had a question for Lance. Over the last, 2 years, you faced, changing the August crop report, and then through the pandemic, a lot of issues on objective yields and where you do it and so forth. Do you see any, both or any learnings from that process you had to go through, or any sort of thing attached to the quality measures you're getting in terms of data?
No, I think for us, it was a pretty seamless process, to be honest. In fact, that was part of why we were willing to make the changes we did. We had gone back and looked at all the data sources that we had. And so we pretty much knew going into the change that starting objective yield in September versus August, for example, really wasn't going to have that big an impact on the quality of the data. So that was pretty seamless. One lesson we did learn was initially we cut the sample sizes back a little more than maybe, we felt like we probably would have if we'd have known going in. And so we did boost some of those sample sizes back up on objective yield. I think we're in the neighborhood of 1,500 samples each on corn and soybeans now. I think we had dropped as low as maybe 1,200 or something, trying to remember the counts offhand. So that was probably, one of the lessons we learned. But one of the things you'll find with cutting the samples back is, and this is true whether it's objective yield, any other survey we do, or even if you want to talk about response rates or things of that nature, if you're going to see impacts, you're typically going to find them at the lowest geographic level. And so if you want to talk about things that we've seen over recent years, it's probably more variability when you get down to the state level, or if we happen to do county estimates, maybe at that level. But nationally, things are, holding together very firmly. And so even with some of the sample sizes that we had to adjust on objective yield, it was really more of a state by state strengthening up that we had to do than it was so much with the total counts.
I think just to pitch in just a little bit here, the pandemic for our data collection staff has been challenging. It's, challenging as an organization. I think we've, risen to those challenges. I think that, for the surveys that we've predominantly conducted by mail or by web and phone, we've done very well. And although I will say that the Postal Service is not as fast as it was, and that's caused us to try to adapt our procedures a little bit about when we mail and how long it takes to get things back, because the mail is still, while we get responses in the web and actually a lot of responses via the web when we do the census, for shorter run surveys, the mail is an important component. I think the tougher part, and and not surprisingly, are the things like an ARMS 2 survey. I'm going to ask you about all the trips that you made across the field and, what fertilizer and chemicals and everything that you did. That is really hard to do on the phone. And both for our data collection staff and also for, for our farmers, to be able to respond, it's cognitively difficult. And so, we collect some of that data by mail. We are back to doing some limited face-to-face interviewing. And so, we're trying to do that in the right way and do it strategically. And so, like everybody else, we've adapted. We've learned some small things, some big things, and we've worked hard to just get the job done. Yeah, Dale.
I'll keep asking questions if nobody else does. I guess that's what us older guys do.
You got 2 minutes, so
This
ask away.
is for the fellow from the EIA. Considering the interest we've had shown here, let's say over the last 4 to 6 months in SAF, sustainable aviation fuel. Also looking at a lot of the commentary and a lot of the papers, et cetera, that have come out regarding biodiesel. What kind of things are afoot at the EIA to start to cover these kinds of industries to get a toehold in it today before we actually get into full-blown demand base for fuels like this? What kind of plans have EIA got in place to start covering these fields?
Yeah, so currently that product is in our other biofuels and biointermediates bucket, so it doesn't get broken out in any specificity. And I think something just went to the House or the Senate, some bill that was going to require EIA to start collecting that data, but that would require us to go through our forms clearance process and all those things. So it's definitely on our radar. But as far as I know, our forms changes for our surveys are for changes coming up in 2023, and they don't include anything with those specific breakouts in mind. I'm sure if we've got more pressure from other agencies, that would be something that maybe we could speed up. But as of right now, we don't have any plans to break that out specifically.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about keeping ahead of the potential field that all of a sudden everybody goes, oh my God, we need data on that, and there isn't anything, and I think that's important. It's less than 2 minutes, Joe.
All right. One thing I want to hit from the web, there was a comment that at least I don't think everybody sees, but it's from Rachel Trago. In addition, several of the grain and feed gain reports provide information about fragrant rice production and exports. And so I think we're at about 4:15, but I'd like to take the opportunity for any of my panelists to, if you had a question you'd wish you'd been asked and you want to have any a parting remark or remarks, you're welcome to. So I don't know if anybody has anything. No? You're all good, huh? Had enough. All right, I'll turn to my Joe DeCampo. I think you got away unscathed today. Janet, do you have anything that you want to offer or share before we come to a close?
Well, I just really appreciate the interest that was shown by the attendees for market news information. That's really heartening for us. And we will get back to people on those questions that they ask. So thank you very much.
All right. All right, well, I want to express my thanks to all the panelists and staff that were out addressing questions. And I know that we have a number of questions that we'll get some more detail on and look out for the transcript or the list of Q&As that we'll have out there. We'll work on that as soon as we can and get it right out. I think last time we were out within a couple of days, so we'll do the best that we can. I want to thank all of our attendees, both in the room and out on my screen here. You're important to us. We really appreciate you taking time to ask questions, to share what's on your mind, and give us some thoughts about how we can do better, because that's how you do better, is getting some feedback and then going back and working on it. So we want to do that. I also want to express some thank yous to the team that helped put this all together. Doing this virtually, not too bad. Doing this in person, not too bad. Doing this hybrid's a little more complicated. So you can see that we had some AV folks and camera folks here in the room and stuff, and I want to thank them. But I want to especially thank Marissa here in the room, who largely keeps me out of trouble almost on a daily basis. Lakia, who kept us out of trouble out on the web, and of course Tina and Jean. Jean put together the booklet that you see here and helped with the organization. Lisa Jenkins de Pisa, and then also Adam Klein, who came out from DC helping us out as well and keeping us all squared away. So, but I also want to make sure and just kind of make a pitch. I'm going back to Caitlin's question or point that she made earlier or made for us. the farmers and ranchers that you all work with, talk to, that you give advice to, that are in your realm, make sure that they understand where data comes from, because statistics are a public good, and penultimately they come from, source data, and that source data in most cases is, farmers, ranchers, and agribusiness folks, and we need their help. And not only do we need their help, but we would love to get their help if they'd respond on the web, because that's the cheapest and fastest. We don't have to, rely on the postal service or data collection expenses. So that's the best way that we can go if we can. But we'll take the data and meet folks wherever we can to get the data in and get it processed so that we can produce those data that you all need. So anyway, thanks for an excellent turnout. Want to know that we're all listening and we're taking it in. You will get an evaluation in a day or so tomorrow in an email from Marissa. And we would like your thoughts on it, especially thoughts around the hybrid environment and how that worked or didn't work and how we might be able to improve it. So with all that, sure appreciate you coming. And Caitlin, 6 o'clock, is that right?
6 p.m. upstairs, 5th floor, Ronda Bar, Spain Industry Outlet Reception, and thank you.
All right. Sure, appreciate your participation. Have a great day.